Do you see me on it?
Yes. So according to my main man, Pete Jones right here, we can, so what we could do if we want to just leave it going
Mhm.
is, we mute the conference room for him.
I muted it. Mr. Myers?
I didn't.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, Mr. Myers, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. It's an echo.
We're turning that off.
Yeah.
Is there an echo now?
But not my seat.
Mr. Myers, is there an echo now?
No, no echo.
All right, great. Thank you. We'll be back in just a couple minutes.
Okay.
Muted us.
Hey, Teresa.
Good to be here.
We ready?
It's not even 11 o'clock yet.
Oh,
We were like ready to go.
Look at your clock.
Well, that was, says it's 11.
Yeah, maybe my watch is
10:59.
10:59. It's pretty much time.
We'll give it to 30 seconds.
It's 11.
11, there you go. Look at us. All righty. Call to order. Council of Government meeting for May the 12th, 2025. Welcome, everybody. It's nice to see everybody's face today. I think all we're missing is Columbus County, right?
And
We got everybody.
Lamont is not here.
Lamont will join. He's always 5 minutes late. So good to see everybody. Tell you what, I will lead us in an invocation of pledge since I didn't ask anybody. Lord, we thank you for allowing us to assemble here today to do the business that we need to do for county region. We ask that you look over and protect all of our first responders. Keep them safe as they do their daily jobs. We ask that you keep over our military as the world seems to be in turmoil right now. And we just ask that you guide us and that we can make wise decisions today. There's a lot on this agenda. We ask all these things in your most holy and precious name. Amen. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
have the agenda in front of you. Do I have any additions or extractions, or are we good to go? No, I was gonna do the closed session, but we're not gonna do it.
Okay.
Anybody have anything else? I have a motion, Brenda
Second.
Bozeman. Jan, second. Just write that down. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The minutes were forwarded to us via email. I hope you had the chance to look over them. I need a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Second. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. We have a presentation on our position classification and pay plan.
So I will give you just a little bit of background. So it's been a while now, but we have had the Piedmont Triad Regional Council, which is the COG up in the Greensboro, Winston-Salem area, who does a lot of pay plans for all over the state, including for many of the communities in the COG region. They did Brunswick County, they did Surf City, and a number of others. We have at the COG have never had a position classification and pay plan that I know of in our history. And so we hired the Piedmont Triad Regional Council to do one for us. And at long last, we have some results that Matt Reese is going to present to us. But I do not see Matt on the participant list unless Matt is Zoom user. Matt, are you with us today?
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can. And I assume we're going to need to let you share your screen.
Yeah, let me see if I can do that right quick. Zoom is being fun with me this morning, so let's see here.
So I'd like to introduce Matt Reese. Are you the assistant director at the Piedmont Triad Regional Council?
I am guilty as charged. Yes, sir. Let's see. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
We got you, Matt.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, I do appreciate you all giving me some time on the agenda today, and just wanted to walk you through what we have on the compensation and classification study. Let's just sort of get to the bottom line here. Let's see if I can navigate this. There we go. What we're talking about is spending $24,000 to improve your market position from 94% to 97%. But then we also want to give you the opportunity to consider some other options that are there on that, and just sort of walk you through the details of what that is. But let's sort of work through the process first, because your employees did the real effort in this study. What this diagram that you're looking at is from the American Compensation Association, and it's the process of establishing a job worth hierarchy, which is essentially what a classification and pay study is doing. It may not be establishing it, but it is evaluating that. So our process starts with those written descriptions, and that's the real work, right? The position description questionnaire is about a 13-page document. All the employees had the opportunity to fill that jewel out, to take all of the work that they do for the COG and then reduce that down to that description. It's a two-part form, so then both the employee and the supervisor complete it. We ask the supervisor not to change what the employee says, but to write things in addition if they think there's differences of opinion. If Alan is reviewing Matt's PDQ and Matt doesn't do a good enough job of describing the decision-making that goes into it, not giving himself the credit that's due, so to speak, perhaps, then Alan can write in his section as supervisor what that is, or if there's things that he feels differently. We take all of that information and sit down and then do an interview with the employees to say, hey, do we have the right understanding of this? This really is their opportunity to stomp out our ignorance about what's going on in the process. All of that's meant to give us the space and the dimensions to establish what are your benchmark positions? What are those comparison positions to things that are going on externally? And then do we have a good understanding of what the hierarchy is of position values, decisions that are being made internally? And so then you can see on the chart here, we could split into two different approaches, one being a market data emphasis and one being a job content emphasis. Typically, we rely on the job content emphasis in public sector. That's the reason that most of the organizations that you all represent are small holding companies. You know, you've got everything from police and fire to libraries and civil services and parks and recreation, all in one pay plan. So then to be able to make sure that those comparisons are kind of consistent in occupational families across the assignment of classes to grades is really important, and to get the nuance of what different levels of work are, where the market may not encompass all of that, the job content method will. And so that's one of the things that we try to do. It is interesting to note that most pay plans in North Carolina look surprisingly similar, that they're typically on a graded schedule. They don't have to be, but they typically are on a graded schedule. Those grades are typically 5% apart, and then there is some width of usually 50 to 70% that's there. So that's really what we're doing, is taking our understanding of what's going on in the organization, then putting it back in to that context of the grades and that schedule that's been established. That's that reconciliation that you see there is the third to the last step. And that reconciliation of the market, we don't ignore the market, but then having that job content emphasis, blending that together, that gives us this assignment of classes to grades. And that's really the document for your consideration today, is that assignment of classes to grades and then how you'll go about implementing that, right? So that's the process for you there. I know that was thrilling and exciting, but let's talk a little bit about what the macro market conditions are. These are what we've all been enjoying and experiencing in this labor market shortage. What we can see here is an inverted relationship of what we've seen traditionally, that we have more job openings, at least we did in the fall when we were looking at this data, than we have folks available for that. So in the Wilmington MSA area, there's 0.9 workers available for every job opening in October of 24 that was there. This is data that's maintained by the Department of Commerce. And this is not looking just at public sector, local government, but looking throughout your labor market for that. The interesting thing to note about this is that it looks very different than historically where we've been. So this is that same sort of data looking at statewide, because they maintain it on a larger data set, longer data set statewide. But you can see here that relationship typically is more like a 3-to-1 relationship of job seekers for job openings, putting the employer in a much stronger market. You can see we inverted that market with the green line going above the purple line sometime around the COVID issue, and it's come back together on some of that. But it has still just been an unusually challenging and historic market. Well, why have those lines been moving together since 2016, the mid-teens? What's been going on? It's been this silver tsunami that we've been talking about, the baby boomers leaving the labor market, right? And so we've seen that decline in labor market and workforce participation. You see the trough that occurs there during COVID. But when you look at the baseline of return after that, We've just not really even come back to where we were in the teens, right? That we're still seeing this drop off. This is what's making things particularly challenging. That gets expressed this way for local governments. So this is data that's available from the league and from the Association of County Commissioners in a survey that they've just recently published. And this shows where those increases in COLA and merit has been historically. You can see the jump that takes place as CPI increases, as inflation was taking hold in 21, 22. And we've really just had this very unusual period of higher increases. There have been a few, you see the 16 increases and the 17 increases that were there, but we're really just in a very different labor market than traditionally we have been. So when we take that down to application for your organization, this is sort of the send net that we put out to say, what are the organizations that we're looking at organizations within the COG membership, and then a few peer organizations across the state, right? Looking at those employers in your area and then those that look like you across the state. How that stacks up is this, that you can see for these positions here, for care coordinator, for ombudsman, aging specialist, and aging compliance specialist there. The first line is what we're recommending for minimum, and the analysis of what's minimum, what's the entry level for the position is the most conservative that we could run. So we're looking at what's that replacement cost minimally. You can see what the market average is for each of those in the orange line there. And then the blue line is where you currently are with all of that. So we're looking at the project care coordinator being at grade 13 at about a 49,000 recommendation. Looking at ombudsman at grade 14 at a $52,000 start. Grade 12 for aging specialist at 47.5. And then grade 11 for aging compliance specialist at 45.2. So what I've run through for you there is where the market is and what those comparisons are, and that we're trying to basically accomplish being as close as we can to market average as possible. As you can see with the ombudsman position, we don't always hit it exactly. The reason for that is because we're trying to come back and assign it to these grades, right? The interpretation of the market, the interpretation of relationships with each class is all coming back to these grades, right? So this is the next thing that we're going to try to accomplish with this study, is to perhaps change the methodology of movement within the pay plan. So this is your existing step and grade pay plan. It's a very traditional pay plan, very useful in some ways. It gives this very prescribed method. Everyone is on a step, everyone is on an alpha letter grade, but in doing that high level of organization, it doesn't allow for a lot of flexibility. That basically you've got these 2.5% steps and everyone has to have that 2.5. It's either you're able to do that or you're not able to do that, right? If you're trying to comply with this plan. So one of the options we have is to maintain this 19-step plan exactly as it is configured here on this page, put people where they would be based on their years of service for that. That's not our highest recommendation for you. That we really think that what you need to consider is amending that plan, maintaining the mins and the maximums and so forth, but instead of having this prescribed 2.5% step, reducing that down to these 4 points of what's a minimum, what's a midpoint for reference in the market, what's maximum value, and then have this annual flat dollar amount that's meant to progress you from minimum to maximum in those 19 steps, right? And those 19 planned increments in this case. So we're keeping that structure of movement through the range of movement from grade A to grade T, but we're giving a higher degree of flexibility to the organization to say, look, you could be at any value point between min and max. We're not trying to give it in this prescribed 2.5%. You got to be exactly on that step. You could be anywhere between min and max, but then we also do have some expectation of where things will progress, which is your annual progress, that flat dollar amount. Now, that flat dollar amount does some things, right? In that flat dollar amount, it does mean that that is a higher percentage increase because you're moving more in percent when you're at minimum. So at minimum, if you got your annual percent, if you're at grade 11 at 47,054 and you received this $1,400 increase, that $1,400 increase on 47,000 is a 3.2% increase. As I approach this midpoint, right, this target perhaps, and I'm getting closer to that 58,000, then that $1,400 is going to be a lower percentage. It's going to be more like 2.5% for me at that point in time. And then if I'm moving all the way to the max, that's gone to 2% of that 1,400 as I approach out towards that 75 point. So it's a different way of looking at compensation. It's front loading it, so to speak. That should help us with retention of folks and being able to be competitive as we move them through the line. So it is a different approach to move to this method of getting rid of all of the steps, condensing it down into a simplified pay plan, allowing for a higher level of flexibility, but then also maintaining this progression that apparently has served the organization fairly well, building that in to what our system would be. How does that look when we apply that to grades? This way, right? This is the proposed assignment of classes to grades stretching from 8 all the way up to 28. In that structure that you have, you can see where all of those, the project care coordinators being assigned, where the ombudsman is being assigned, your planner there at grade 18 is being assigned, the fiscal support technician at grade 11, there at the 47 minimum. Those are, I just want to draw attention to those as good benchmarks of comparison with where we're putting you in relation to other classes, other competitors. So really what happens.
If I could jump in for 1 second, if you could go back there. One of the things I think that it helped me understand what this is and how this is different from what we're doing, was that if you have 2 people at the same grade, which would mean same general level of responsibility and that kind of thing, but maybe we're hired at different times or have different experience or whatever, or at different pay. Maybe they have the same type of experience, but they're hired at different times, and one person has progressed further than the other. If they both are doing good work, if they're in the same grade, they're getting the same annual increase rather than the person who makes more necessarily getting a at the same percentage, their increase is higher for the same work, presumably. We only have one circumstance I can think of where we have 2 people at the exact same position. The ombudsman, we have 2 ombudsmen, but both are doing great work. Both are performing very well. One has been here a little longer and makes a little more than the other. So right now, the person who makes more, their annual increase is higher than the other peer employee. This would balance that out so that they have equivalent increases year over year. Is that accurate, Matt?
Yes. Yeah.
So that's how that would sort of play out.
Exactly. It's different between that percentage-based system and the flat dollar amount system.
Maybe another way to look at that, Ellen, is if you flip it, those 2 over time under the old system would just drift further and further. A static amount, percentage, you got to say, okay, everybody gets 4%. Those 2 are actually going to get further and further and further apart.
Even if
they're all
annual
equal.
Evaluations are superlative, the person who's already ahead pulls further ahead.
Correct.
For the same quality of work.
Correct.
So thank you. I appreciate you all having that discussion and those insights. So then that helps set up where we are for your options, right? So option A is saying if you maintain your current plan and if we did a slight movement to move folks based on their tenure where we've gotten off over previous years, right? That with fringe, that would be this $13,000 implementation. And you can see what that does for you. Your market score is going to be relatively that 100% at entry regardless, right? But then your average market, right? What your salaries are to the market average is that 96% there in your option A to maintain it. Option B is the one that we're really recommending. It's to move to this revised pay plan with the flat dollar progression over the 19 steps. That's a higher cost to align that with where folks are and put them in that at the $24,000 cost. And then we move up a point in that dollar spend on the market average. Again, entry is going to be the same for each of these because the structure is going to be the same. It's how far in that structure are we progressing with these different dollar amounts. Then a strategy that some places have used, I think the cost point is just a little too high, is to say we want to get really aggressive and move folks based on their tenure to that job target, to the midpoint of that pay plan in that 6 years, and then overall to the max in 19. But to be more aggressive on that, you really have to double your spend to get to that 51,000. Moves it up another point in terms of where folks are at that 98. Not everyone is moving in any of these scenarios, but it's really the structure. That's really the big question that is being presented. And for you all to ask yourselves is which of these structures is going to work best for us, right? In that. So then overall, you just want to look at what these options are. The recommendation is that $24,000 spend, moving you from 94 to 97 of that, and approve those changes is the ask, right? So you would be approving this assignment of classes to grades and saying to your executive director, we want you to implement that using this new plan that has the 19 steps with a flat dollar amount. And we understand that that's a $24,000 overall increase specifically for the time period that we're looking at. It's this 23,930 that's there with the fringe included. So you would approve the assignment of classes to grades when you're ready to do that, and approve the implementation instructions for your executive director. I know I kind of went through that fairly quickly, but I wanted to give you all time to ask me questions or have discussion amongst yourselves as need be on that. Can I answer any questions for you?
Let me just add a little bit of context. So typically the way we, and I think this is atypical for most of your jurisdictions, because of the way our funding comes in, and we typically have this discussion later in the agenda when we talk about our annual budget. Normally what we do is we adopt our budget, but we don't implement any salary adjustments until November 1st. We do our evaluations in September, and then by October, we typically have the final allocations from our agencies on what our actual dollars are. When we adopt our budget annually, we typically don't know the final numbers. And so there's a little bit of guesswork, and we always come back to you guys in October and say, here's what our actual allocations are. We've adjusted our budget accordingly. And now we feel more confident to say, yes, we can afford, this COLA, this merit, that kind of thing, which go into effect normally in November. And so my thought is, and Matt, we probably talked about this, but I don't remember, is that this would be for a November 1st effective date. So that also meaning, I don't know that a decision has to be made today necessarily, although you're certainly welcome to.
I mean, I can give my feedback. The reason I think B is probably the right place. I don't like C because I don't like restructuring pay plans and then going too deep into trying to get everybody in the right bucket all in one time, because you need the pay plan you never get 100% correct, right? So you gotta implement a pay plan. This is how we're going to pay people. And then over time, you can get people to where, I mean, there will be some adjustments, obviously, but in general, you try to do all that at one time, it gets squirrely, and then it can also get very political, which I think you want to avoid.
Well, and something else I think is
That's my-
worth noting is we've had a lot of turnover recently, not a ton, but a fair amount. And we've done a pretty good job of hiring folks at comparable rates, or market, comparable rates. So the reality is, I looked at this just the other day. Under all three of these scenarios, there's actually very few positions that are getting adjustments. Most of our folks are not getting adjustments even in C. And I think the way I saw it is that in option A, 6 people are getting adjusted. In option B, 6 people are getting adjusted, but 2 of them are not the same. And in option C, 7 people are getting adjusted, and it's all the people from options A and B. 5 people get adjusted in all 3 scenarios, and then 2 in A and B, or 1 in A and B, and 1 in B and C. And so the C is, I mean, it's helping 1 extra person that wouldn't be helped in B, but it's really getting the same, more or less, the same number of people, progressing them further. It's not really helping more people, which I found interesting, but I think is maybe reflective of the fact that we've been doing a pretty good job for most of the positions that have changed in one way or another over the, relatively recent past. The other thing I think that's worth considering is that almost all of these positions are funded by grants that may or may not necessarily fully support the recommendation. This is not like your jurisdictions where we have tax dollars that we can spend as we wish. Now, we do have dues. We've typically not subsidized programs with dues, largely because dues are 1% of our budget and we don't have much flexibility there. But I think that's an added consideration that's probably not one that you guys deal with so much in your organizations back home.
Alan, I have a question. As far as when they had the flat rate amount, which it seems like that's what everybody's going for, how does that work for currently there's a COLA and a merit? Is that flat amount the merit amount? Would there still be a COLA amount? Or is that all inclusive in there?
Matt, that does not include COLA, right? COLA gets applied to the minimum, and then merit is any adjustment beyond that, correct?
That's right. The way you would do that is your COLA adjusts your mins and your maximums. And then as that COLA adjusts that's going to change the annual increment in the middle, right? And then that annual increment in the middle is really where your merit is being applied. So you would increase your table that amount, that increases that annual dollar amount as well. And then you can still have folks that may progress more than what that annual amount is if there's warrant for that, right? If there's an exceptional performer, some condition that applies. The structure is there to do it, but the idea would be we're going to adjust the table with 2%, 3%, 4%, whatever we think that adjustment needs to be to maintain market. It gets applied across all of those classes. Then performance and being sure that it's acceptable performance overall is where that annual increment would then be applied on the individual employee basis.
So 2 things about that as I understand it. So one is the way it looks when you see it as presented is that if you're in, grade 18, that every year you're going to get the same increase. But that would only be true if there were no COLA. Right, so the increases as COLA moves the whole scale up. It's just within the grade in any given year, it's the same. The other thing I think that's worth noting is that this change would require a change to our personnel policy. Right now, the personnel policy and the evaluation procedure is all based around 2.5% or 0 merit. Nothing in between. It talks about the steps and sort of all of that is baked into our policy. So any changes to the structure would require then us to figure out how to change the personnel policy accordingly, and would have to bring you guys an amended personnel policy as well.
Now, the COLA, if you are already mid-range, let's say you're already within the minimum and the maximum, you range the COLA. If you don't if you don't go below minimum, then you necessarily wouldn't get a COLA increase. What you're gonna get is a flat rate.
Say that again.
Right now, everyone gets a COLA increase. So if you're making 20,000 a year and we do a 1% salary, you're gonna get, a COLA, you're gonna get an increase of your salary by 1%. But doing this right here, if you're in between those, I understand adding the minimum to
Oh, I see what you're saying. Because you're not on a step, you don't have an automatic COLA.
COLA increase.
But I think that would just be a policy thing, right? COLA would be applied to every position in the pay plan, correct?
That's right.
So you would get a COLA if you got 2%, you would get 2% of COLA, and then
For the plan, the
Yeah.
COLA only affects minimum and maximum,
Yeah.
but for the employees, the COLA affects the salary.
So that would kind of have to be something we'd have to tweak and then when we do the policy updates too,
Possibly,
correct?
possibly.
Okay.
So when was the last time this was reviewed?
Never,
It's never been reviewed. How long has it been established?
longer than I've been here.
Long time.
I've been here 26 years. We've been on a salary and grade, the step, however, we've been here and the policies have come in. We've done we haven't done an overall study throughout the whole organization, but I think as new positions came on or as certain directors have seen that their positions have required a little bit more in the marketplace.
But it's always been in-house. We've
Yes,
never had a
in-house.
third party look at how we do things and make a recommendation as long as probably my predecessor
outside
wanted to
agency
do
has done
this
it.
in-house, this type of thing in-house. I think it's been well over 20 years, 25 years,
Probably 25.
30 years since
When did he
we
start?
talked about this.
91?
So
He was here before Holly and I.
Yeah.
No, he was here before me.
AJ was here before you. And that
it
was.
doesn't matter. Let's say it's been 30 years.
Yeah.
If it's been 24,
But what you
30,
do-
it doesn't matter. It's been way too long.
Cause you're gonna have to adjust the minimum maximum for somebody like Holly that's been here forever.
Well, and we have.
Colors, that's got to be adjusted.
And we have done that.
Uh,
We have reassigned, we brought you guys pay plan amendments where we have reassigned positions to higher classes or what have you. Every year when we do COLA, the minimum gets increased. When people, which doesn't happen very often, but when people get promoted within the organization, they go to a new grade
mhm.
and I would say that where we have probably strayed from a traditional pay plan is that where we feel confident that the minimum is too low, we offer somebody more than the minimum so that their salary is enough for them to take the job. So we've sort of been compensating for our pay plan, but always based on our own judgment, never based on a third-party assessment.
What's the reason for the high turnover excluding pay?
I don't think there is one. A lot of it has been retirement. Some of it has been more like newer employees who are, just sort of moving on to other opportunities or leaving the area.
I can only think of one where it's been a salary problem. Other than that, it's been the grants ending or, like Alan said, kind of just a retirement, or they're just getting out of school, they're getting their feet wet, they're trying to figure out what they want to do with their life.
Mhm.
And then they move on to like a planner, for instance, and
Yeah.
then they might move on to a municipality or a county.
Yeah, we've had a couple
Planning
planners that
position.
have left
Yeah.
for other opportunities.
Town of Burgaw has. We've had a couple of COG employees that have come from here.
Blame Jan.
Yeah.
It's one step below Jan, but anyway, I'm gonna voice my opinion on this, for what it's worth. Been in the federal government just because you go to work every day and don't do anything, you still get a raise is beyond my understanding. With that, list that's showing there, in my opinion, I see a lot of fat that can be trimmed. Number three is, what are the standards in order to give a raise? Is there a standard to be able to?
Yeah, so right now we have the personnel policy has an evaluation process. We have an evaluation form.
Is it evidence-based though? Or is it just, well, I did this and nobody does any checks and balances? Because this is how, I'll give you an example. This is how DOT gets a reputation of 5 people holding shovels and 1 person working, right? So if we're not verifying what people are doing, are we just going ahead and taking the word of mouth?
Well, I mean, the supervisors are doing the evaluation.
Okay.
And then the supervisors discuss the evaluations with me. I think that, I mean, the reality is, I feel like, we're closer to being understaffed than overstaffed, particularly in some positions. And I think the other thing that's important to remember is that, other than our admin department and some of our planning staff, I think everybody else has, state or federal monitors that are ensuring that the funds are being properly used. And so I think that,
Alan, that's just a classification. These are the lists, these are employees that are here. That's not all the employees here. So I was just wondering what trimming the fat means.
right, yes, that's a good point. That doesn't say how many positions, people we have at each position, and a lot of those are reserved anyway. But, I think the other thing to consider with regard to, trimming the fat is, 9 times out of 10, we have a program that pays us to do a thing. There's a scope of work related to the grant that funds the position, and typically it funds a person to do the work, and it often doesn't fund more than 1 person to do the work. And sometimes we're subsidizing a little bit from other programs. For example, in this budget that we'll discuss later on in the aging program, the planning administration budget is supplementing the funds that are available for our ombudsman because there's not enough salary. There's not enough funding in the ombudsman program to fund the positions for 12 months. Even though the scope of work requires that we do this work. So I am less concerned with the number of positions we have and whether there's, sort of excess positions or things of that nature. As far as the salary increases go, one of the things that Matt has proposed with this new structure is that right now, if you meet the criteria for merit, it's 2%. Exactly. And so, if you have somebody that's, maybe not doing quite as good a job as somebody else, you can't give one person 2%, one person 1%. It's not available. It's 0 or 2.5. And I think giving a little bit.
Doing a good job, they don't deserve a merit.
Well, they're not doing a good job to get 0, but maybe they're doing a good enough job to get a half or 1, or maybe, you know, and maybe they're doing a really good job, but not 2.5, maybe 2. I don't know. I
Well,
think.
that's why I was asking, is there evidence based? Just use you to him. Is she bringing you sufficient evidence to show that she's warranted a raise? Is she able to verify what she's doing, or are you able to see it? What
So
she's doing?
the employee isn't proposing their own raises or doing their own evaluations. The supervisor is doing the evaluation.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking. Is the supervisor instructing the employee to say, hey, this is what I want you to bring me. This is what I want to verify in order for you to be warranted a raise?
I don't think specifically, but I think our department heads are we're not that big of an organization. Our department heads are pretty involved in the day-to-day work of their employees.
So I guess what I'm saying, if all these positions, if the supervisors in charge of this would be able to bring sufficient evidence, you think that would be suffice to get raises? Or to go to a flat rate?
What do you consider?
What's the question?
Depends what's significant evidence? I guess that would be the loaded question.
Well, it depends on what the project is. What's the Gantt chart say? Are you ahead in time on your Gantt chart? Or are you behind?
I don't know what a Gantt chart is. I'm sorry, I can't answer that.
It's basically a timeline of projects and activities.
So like in the prior year, if you would have said, this is what I want you to accomplish this year, when you go back for your evaluation for the next year, where are we at on this? Is that what you're talking about? Okay.
We do that with our evaluations.
So a self-evaluation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody does a self-evaluation.
Self-accountability first is what you're after, and then the supervisors that are verified.
Mhm.
And we're so small. I mean, I'm pretty much hands-on with everyone.
No. I'm not talking about the size of this. I'm talking about accountability, right? I don't care if it's 2 people.
That's what I'm saying.
Right.
I talk to my employees every day. I talk to people they interact with every day.
Yeah.
I get letters of how great they are. So I think we do have that substantial information to say, yes, they are great, or no, they're not. They're not doing a great job.
But all these people, all these proposed positions,
Well, these are not all
Classes.
those positions.
classes are great.
Those are just classifications.
You don't even have somebody.
These are the ones they have. There are 20 people.
Right.
A couple part-time. This is a retention discussion. In my opinion, you're adjusting for market. I mean, this is the discussion we all have in our local governments. What do we have to do to adjust to retain employees? Because if we don't, they will go away. And we need people, good people to work.
And this definitely is not a discussion about whether we're going to fill a position.
Right.
That's also a different discussion, I think, which maybe gets more to your question. Is the pay plan itself and the number of approved positions. This is just for a position. What is the pay scale?
Well, I'd use a different word. So I don't think we should be confusing this pay plan with your performance management plan. How you set goals, how you rate people, all that is a completely separate thing than this, right? It's important. He's correct. They are tied together.
Yes.
But for today, I don't think the performance management methodology that you use inside your organization is before us. This is, what are the classifications? How do you move through the classifications, right? If the performance management plan is deemed broken, well, then we fix that too. But that's not today. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And for the
Because-
market,
Right,
because Wilmington.
exactly.
There's a gap.
Because, that would be a great argument to have, is how do you manage performance within your organization? That's just not what this is about. This is about
Right.
how you pay people.
And the evaluation process would need some adjustment because again, right now, it's 2.5% or 0.
I think each of us, as electeds, are going through this process in our county or municipalities right now. I had a proposal in my last budget meeting to not give any merit raises from one of my fellow board members. And I kind of erupted. I'm not cutting a budget on the backs of my employees. That's not where you cut a budget. And
Save your way to prosperity.
yeah, there's other ways to cut, and we have found some. We are in government, we are a 100% service business. We don't produce anything. We're not selling widgets. All we have is our employees to give the best service we can give. So when we say trim the fat, that means getting rid of employees. That's all we got. I'm not big on doing that with any budget. They're the backbone.
Plus to Alan's point, there are duties that you have to do, and there are people that have to do those duties.
Yeah.
So,
Right, or not accept the funds
Right,
and eliminate the grant,
Yeah,
the
'cause you don't-
services as well as the position.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we're gonna accept the funding from state or federal agency to perform a duty, then we're going to use that funding to staff those services. Sure.
We are in the business of accountability. And so when we receive the funds, at least in my department, and I think in yours, we're providing oversight to the delivery of services in the communities. And so we're all about accountability, whether we like it or not. And we have a skeleton staff to perform those accountability duties for organizations that have much larger staff. And so we're constantly looking at data and numbers and efficiencies and, you know, checking for errors. So that's really the biggest portion of what we do.
Yeah. It's primarily what we do.
so Alan, you're asking us to adopt, this recommendation is to be,
Option B.
or
I'm trying to decide if I feel like we're ready for adopt, or maybe direct me to pursue that, and I'll come back to you at your next meeting with further details. I think Don needs to run this through the budget, and make sure that if B is where you want to go, you know, how we would make that work, and that kind of thing. But we definitely want your feedback and direction on how to proceed. Like I said, the actual pay plan there, where this would go into effect, we would probably bring to you in October.
But I think those are two different steps. I think the thing before us, as I read this, is do you like this pay plan? And I do think we should adopt that. How you implement it, that'll be something else we'll vote on.
We would need an effective date in the future, though, so we could bring to you a personnel policy amendment to where we could implement this plan. We don't have that right now.
You know, we can't, if you guys adopt it, we can't implement it because the policy, personnel manual has
policy,
not been
yeah.
updated
It's not
yet.
consistent with our current policies.
So you'd rather bring all that at one time, is that what you're saying?
But we want to not embark on that project unless we know you want us to.
So we don't prepare something thinking that this is what you want, and then we come back and all of that work was for naught. So we kind of want you to tell us how you want us to pursue and how you want us to adjust the policy.
It's a pretty, it's not a huge project, but it's a fairly significant project to revise that personnel policy to ensure that there's no inconsistencies and that it can be implemented. And so it's going to require some care and a little bit of time. And so we want your instruction to go through that process. We don't need to, obviously, if you're not in favor of this, we don't need to waste any time modifying our personnel policy.
so what's the do nothing? If we don't,
Presentation only.
yeah, but I'm
No, but this
just,
is asking for direction.
Yeah.
if we don't, then you're gonna potentially struggle with retention of employees, or does that mean recruitment? I mean, you did this for a reason. It needed to be done.
One of the reasons is it's never been done, right? I mean, we do need to have a third party look at the way we do things and ensure that, you know, if there's any recommendations that we can implement them.
Ways we could improve, because there's been a lot of, at least the 7 years I've been here, there's been questions about, you know, especially when you're hiring somebody, where you put someone in, how you do it, and it's, and how we retain our employees.
I would personally like to look at the personnel policy before we go.
Yeah,
delve
not
into
doing
this.
it. But this is what Matt recommends. Is that what I heard?
This is Matt's recommendation.
All right, I'm gonna try it. So I don't know how you get consensus without a motion, so motion to request staff to review, to evaluate option B, bringing back a consistent personnel policy and what'd you call the thing, pay plan, where you're actually gonna look at who's affected and how they're affected
Yeah, and sort of the budget implications.
and budget implications by when? August, September?
So we've got a meeting next month. It will, to adopt the budget, don't think it will be ready by then. I think I should try to bring it to you for the August meeting.
Okay,
So, and if there's further discussion and tweaks that are needed, then October meeting would sort of be the deadline to get it all.
okay, so motion, as I stated, to bring back to this board for the August meeting. How's that for a motion?
Lengthy.
Well,
Yeah.
Got it.
I'll second.
Gotta say.
Who was it?
That was Lamont.
Lamont joined us earlier.
Can you repeat the motion?
so the motion is to request staff to look at, to take option B as presented here today. Evaluate the personnel policy changes, bring back the personnel policy changes to implement that, and to also bring back the budgetary impact of that in the August meeting. So we're not approving the plan,
But you're putting this before the personnel policy.
no, we're saying do it at the same time.
Bring it all back.
Bring it all back.
Because if your personnel policy is not right, they've already wasted a bunch of time, then this is not gonna follow suit. Your policy is gonna direct what they do.
That's not what I heard. What I heard was they need to know which one of these options we prefer so that they can know which one to go evaluate the personnel
Which changes to the personnel policy
policy would be needed.
Yes.
So it's stepwise. We're not saying we're not approving B, but we're saying go with B. That's the recommended. And then come back with it all together. If we do B, here's the personnel policy that would be required, and here's the budgetary impacts. That's what I heard.
My takeaway was the same as yours, Mayor. That's how I see it.
Well, Chairman, there's a motion on the
So I have a
floor.
motion, I have a second, which was Barbie and Walker.
Lamont.
Oh, well,
Lamont.
that's right, I'm sorry. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
You got that?
Matt, thank you. I will certainly be in touch with you, and if I hear any questions that I need your backup for from my board members, then I will either direct them directly to you or I will funnel them to you.
Sounds good. Thank you for letting us be of service to you. Take care.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Matt. All right. Moving on. Dawn, you're a busy girl today.
I know. Our first is our budget report through the end of April. I don't really have a whole lot of significance to report. We're moving quite along. We're still, as you all are aware, we have various year ends for some of these grant dates. So some of them that look underspent aren't necessarily underspent. It's just when they're where they need to be for, full expenditures. Our aging department is the only one that's currently on a fiscal year end of 6/30. And if you notice, the counties are a little bit underspent, but that's because we are behind in our reimbursements, not because of our we took a while to get the contracts in place and the state turnaround for getting the funds to us in time. So like we just cut April checks to last Friday. So like they're getting paid, they're just not up to date enough to report it on this, but our counties have no issue whatsoever in spending all of their funds for the aging department. So that one I know does look a little under compared to where it normally is, but it's not underspent. So you guys have had a chance to look over all of this. I know I've kind of gone through it kind of quickly, but like I said, there's not really anything significant to report. Did anybody have any questions?
No, but I'm glad I don't have your job.
I've got a flow chart up of where everything is.
I do want to make note of two items on here. So under the Homeless Services Department, there's, that's, COC use of fund balance. I don't know if all of you remember, but there was $12,000 that we had that was special purpose funds that was given to a predecessor of Trillium, by a predecessor of Trillium for us to do something within a year. And I don't know, it was before my time, but it never got done. We still have the money and it's still on the books, and we can't spend it for the purposes that it was given. And
It's not a business.
and the
The
grant-
place that gave it to us to start it.
and
not a
the
business.
grant, well, they didn't go out of business. They merged into Trillium. So the grant agreement is very specific that we're to return the funds if we don't, any unused funds. But the entity doesn't exist to return the funds to. So we have somebody at Trillium that's trying to find the proper documentation so that Dawn has the backup needed to actually write them a check, because we can't just write a check without any invoice or, other documentation. The grant agreement says to give it to somebody else. We're going to write it to Trillium. We've got to have the proper backup. So they're trying to find the proper documentation that shows that the bylaws for the merger is called new company. It doesn't say Trillium. It hadn't been named yet. So we're getting there, but you guys approved for us to spend that. We haven't done it yet, but that's what that is. And then you may remember as well, down in workforce, we have a similar type of fund balance that you have approved for us to use. Mr. Springer, that's the one where you encouraged us to not give it back unless absolutely necessary. And so we are still working with the state on that. And, as we promised, we're not going to give it back unless we have to. But if we have to, we've got your authority to do so.
The state told us that they are waiting to hear from DOL, so that it's still kind of in limbo on what we're doing with that. And I reached out to our contact at Trillium for her to see if she's been able to find anything as of yet, because I told her I'd like to get this taken care of before year end, since we had you guys do the budget amendment and everything. So we are actively working on all of that.
It's $12,000. It's not a big priority for them, but they apparently do have a new program where they could actually apply this for the purpose that it was intended. Maybe they don't have it yet, but they're working on it. And so they are also interested in having it happen. It's just not timing wise a priority.
That one, I'm hoping we will get spent by year end. The workforce balance, I don't think we're gonna have that spent by 6:30. If we do, I will be, or a resolution, I should say. I don't know if we're gonna do a resolution by 6:30 or not.
And if it is not currently proposed in our annual budget for next fiscal year. But if it doesn't happen by the end of the fiscal year, then we likely will just ask you guys to reauthorize it again in October or in August, so that if there's action, we can have your prior authority. But in any case, wanted to bring those to your attention.
Alan, I have a quick question. Can I go through everything that I'm doing and have them do a joint approval, or do they need to do each?
No, they should approve everything separately.
Okay, so y'all need to accept the budget report, please.
Any further discussion on the budget report? If not, I need a motion and a second to approve.
No motion.
Linda
I'll second.
And Teresa. All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, budget ordinance amendment.
Okay, we are proposing an increase of our budget by $215,004. The $180,000 in area agency on aging is for our NSEP program. This is especially for New Hanover County and slightly for Brunswick County. And our NSEP program, that is not a program where we receive a set amount every year. They serve a certain number of people, and if you meet those parameters, then we get reimbursed from it's USDA, correct? USDA. So when we no longer have ARPA funds, and last year, some of those funds were, more people were getting served with the ARPA money, especially in New Hanover County. So this year, they're able to, what was the program you said?
So with ARPA funds, you could not get inset reimbursement, which is 80 cents per meal that you provide to an older adult in our region. So in New Hanover County, they were using a lot of the ARPA funds for meals, and they were not getting inset. And this year, everyone they were serving with ARPA is being served with the regular nutrition funds. So it's really increased our inset reimbursement, but the USDA just sends us that 80 cent per meal after they put it in our reporting system. So we just didn't have enough in the line item because we looked at our budget from last year. And that's how we based our inset.
So we will get reimbursed for every dollar of this, and we can't spend it if the meal hasn't been spent. But in order to reimburse the counties for the amount that they're eligible for, we need an additional appropriation from you guys.
And this right here is just a guesstimate based upon how much we have been spending thus far. And basically, New Hanover County wanted to continue serving the people that they had increased their servings for through the ARPA program. So that's what that is. And the bulk of that, like I said, is New Hanover.
And as you can see, at $180,000 even at 87 cents per reimbursement, it's just an estimate. We don't know how much it will be. We will reimburse for every meal that is reimbursable and not for one that, not for anything else that isn't. And presumably we will not need another ask for an additional amendment for you guys before the end of the fiscal year. This should do it.
Yeah, and also we have to have all of our, as you know, our own local government, we have to have all of our budget amendments to you guys at our June meeting. We don't pay New Hanover County their final payments and or any of the counties until July or the beginning of August. So I to make sure I have to make sure I have enough in there to cover it in case.
Right. You have to appropriate enough for us to cover whatever the expenses end up being, because you can't amend our budget for this year after June 30.
That's why it's a nice little number. And then local government services, that is a new broadband type of program that I will let Alan kind of give you the details on that. We're not getting very much. A lot of it's going to be passed through, and he understands it a little better than I do.
Yeah, so
I understand the money.
the Institute for Emerging Issues at NC State got a grant from North Carolina Department of Information Technology a couple years ago to do digital inclusion plans across various different COG regions. They offered us the opportunity to do the planning work, and we didn't have the staff at the time to handle it. So we told them to do the plan themselves. So they are going through that process. Part of that included some funding from, is it the Duke Endowment?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
To implement some of the recommendations out of that plan. IEI at NC State prefers for us to, and we have the staff now at least to handle this little piece of it, where we will handle the 4 implementation projects, one at each of our 4 counties. It's $7,500 per county. It's not a whole lot of money, but we'll handle those 4 projects and be a pass through and work with those counties to get those projects done. And there's a very little amount, about $5,000 of administration for us to handle that. So nothing major, but opportunity for us to be a little bit more involved in that process and to help our communities develop projects that are good use of that endowment money.
Any other discussion on the budget amendment? Not, I need a motion.
So moved. Second.
Bobby. Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you all. Okay, moving on. Approval of the auditor's contract and agreement letter.
Oh, sorry. They actually gave us 4 letters this year, and I wanted y'all, the first 2 are the when it says communication and schedule of schedule expenditures of federal awards, these are required communications with the board. The communication, it basically is just, it lays the groundwork for communication between the auditors and the executive committee. Because the auditors, even though we deal with them more and we're the ones who have the hands-on experience and all of that, they report to you all. They're who you're going to present to. And so they wanted this letter to go out to make sure that you guys understand there's an open line of communication. They'll let you know if something comes up that they feel is needs to be noted before they do their presentation. And usually they do it in November or December. Or if you know of something, I know they have discussions with Mike and Alan and myself, but if there was any, especially if you look like your responsibilities, if we have any new affiliates, directors or officers, changes in the organizational structure, anything significant that was to happen during the audit, they just ask that you let them know. And the other is the schedule of expenditure and federal awards. It says in order to properly plan our single audit engagement, we need a draft copy of your schedule of expenditures of federal awards and a summary schedule of prior year findings. This is something that I provide. I give this to them, but they're just letting you know that this is something they need in order to do it. And if I don't provide it to them, then they won't be able to properly plan their audit. And I'm sure they'll let you all know that didn't provide it. That's part of the open communication. The next two are is the LGC contract and the engagement letter. For those of you who are unaware, an engagement letter, it outlines the terms and conditions of the audit and who is responsible for what. And what I need for you all to do is to give permission for Mike to sign the local government contract. And then of course I will pre-audit it as the chairman. You'll be responsible for signing that. And then for the engagement letter, we need to get permission from myself, Alan, and Mike to sign this as well, because it lays out everything that we're responsible for and what the auditors are responsible for and what they are, the purpose of the audit. So we just.
It's all pretty standard.
Yeah, we don't prepare any of this. The auditors don't prepare any of this. I mean, this is from the LGC, and then these audit letters are from their standard GASB forms that are just basically filled out and changed depending on who the auditor is. So anywhere you are, they're gonna remain the same.
I could
Accept
explain.
both of those?
Go ahead.
Okay,
No,
we can accept them both at the same time?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, all of
Okay,
that.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
just so you all understand. The reason I'm part of this signing is and Ginger could explain this even better than I. I am, as the chair of the COG, I'm what's called a CLEO, the chief local elected official. So when I put my signature on this paperwork, I am personally responsible. They could come after me as well as they can Alan and Dawn. So those who want to be the chair in the future, know that you can be held personally responsible. They could take money from you. So.
Well, I'll make a
That-
motion to make you personally responsible.
That's not generous. Thank you, Steph.
You're welcome. I'll make a motion to accept both of these, what are they? The one is the,
All the
Engagement
above, all
letter
the
in the
above.
contract.
I'll be above.
All right,
You see a second?
I need a second.
Second.
Who was that, Jan? All right. All those in favor, we signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That passed. All right. Lastly, Dawn, you're a busy girl today. Fund balance policy.
Well, this one's me, not
Yeah, I'm
Dawn.
hand that off to Alan.
Oh, Howard.
So, so this is actually something that Mike asked me to prepare. We had a meeting a couple of weeks ago. And we were just sort of talking about budget and federal uncertainty and funding and things of that nature. And he had requested that we come up with a policy, because we don't have one officially, of establishing a minimum fund balance target, and sort of a, description of like what we might use fund balance for and how we might build fund balance to maintain those targets. And so I have put this draft together for you guys. It is an amalgamation of various different fund balance policies that I have found at other places, tweaked to, I think, meet our particular needs. And so I will, I guess, just open it up to any questions you guys have. I did share it with Mike, you know, again, since he asked me to prepare it, I did share it with him in advance before we put it in the packet. And he said, yeah, it looks good, put it in the packet.
If I can add to that, we had a very lengthy meeting. We sat here for 3.5 hours. There's not a whole lot of confidence in the budget right now because there's too many unknowns. They may be cutting money on workforce development, area on aging. We just don't know yet. In order to keep our programs going, all we will have is our fund balance. I mean, if they cut workforce development in half, we need to keep that program going. I mean, certainly there will be cuts, but we need to keep it going. We can't just one day say, that's it, it's done. Because there's too many things in progress. As you hear, there are things, even though money's come very stagnated. It's not like in counties and municipalities where, you know, come July 1, everything starts anew. It's not like that with our program. Some of them kick off in October, some of them, it's so staggered and difficult. Thank God Alan is doing get this. Because there's no way to keep up. There's a good shot, the homelessness program might be done.
If the president's budget is approved by the Senate.
There's so many unknowns. So we have to kind of be prepared that things might go astray as we know it. So Alan and I spoke about a strong fund balance. Right now, we have enough money. If everything went bad, we can keep the door open for, what is it, 3 months?
Yeah, I mean, that's not really operating programs. That's
Right.
just keeping
Like
staff
those.
on
Yeah.
board. More for like, so the last time we sort of needed to consider this type of thing was when, during the recession, when during sequestration, when there was no budget. And so there was no authorization to spend the federal funds. And so, you know, there was always the thought that the federal government was going to come to a resolution, and they did. But rather than laying everybody off and, getting rid of everybody's health insurance and that kind of thing, we were able to maintain health insurance. And I don't remember at the time anymore whether we were maintaining salaries or not. I think there was some kind of combination, but in any case, a lot of the local governments were having to dip into fund balance to cover operating expenditures, you know, for the interim. So, you know, if there's with all the federal uncertainty, we thought it was a good idea to just sort of make sure we have a good target on fund balance so that, you know, we know that we can continue to pay our rent, continue to pay our expenses. When we calculate our fund balance for this particular purpose, it is not to maintain programs. So, you know, we would not be reimbursing counties for aging, for nutrition expenditures under this scenario. It would just simply be to keep the staff on for when we can, you know that we can move forward again. Obviously, if programs are eliminated, that's a different story.
We currently have to ask for reimbursement every month, at least for the two larger programs for workforce development and aging. We have to submit into the state systems how much we need to reimburse everybody. So what we're talking about here, when he says not paying programs, that means that we cannot put that money into their systems. We're not going to get it.
Right.
And that way,
it would only be for funding COG expenses, not pass-through expenses.
Which means possibly furloughing employees.
So that's sort of the purpose of the fund balance, is to not have to do that until you have to. Because,
But you gotta keep a building and lights on.
Right, until we know what's
Plumbing
going on.
working and.
I mean, even if, God forbid, something horrible were to happen and we were gonna have to shut the COG down, you'd still have to operate for a period of time to do that.
Right. Yeah, your lease probably does not end.
Right.
Well, now, we do have in all of our, anything that we sign, it says contingent upon funding availability.
We can get out of our lease, but.
Yeah, we do
still
have
to
that.
Get rid of the furniture before we get rid of the police.
There will be a lot of uncertainty until we have a federal budget and know what it says. Since all of our money basically is federal money, and not a whole lot from the state.
And then even if it's not passed, even if they have and they don't get a CR, if the government shuts down, that means that we can't pull from those sources. And even when we even when we ask for the subcontractors' money, we're asking for our portion of that as well, like what it costs for the workforce employees, what it costs for admin, what it costs for everyone. So the use of this would allow us to be able to do that.
So what we're proposing is a 25% fund balance, 25% of annual operating expenses. Again, that's excluding pass-through funds as a minimum and 33% as a target. And I have sort of de facto been operating under that position up until this point. It's just never been something we discussed with the board, and it's never been something official. It's just been, my own thoughts. So now we've sort of committed it to policy, for your consideration.
It sounds reasonable. It's a quarter. You could keep the lights on for a quarter. Doesn't mean all the programs are on, but you got 90 days to get it figured out, or you gotta lock the door.
And
Basically, it's what that is.
dawned on me, one of the things, every single grant that we get, every single department contributes to the admin costs. It's shared amongst all of them, okay? Should one disappear completely, and we'll say homelessness is going away altogether, the other departments need to pick up what's missing. When you lose homelessness, the other departments have to now contribute that much more to keep admin going. So
So fund balance might also be used in a short period of time.
Yeah.
For loss of a program.
For loss of a program.
So, any questions on all of that?
Oh, I guess it's important, of course, to say, we can't spend fund balance without the board amending the budget to appropriate fund balance.
Right.
So the use of the fund balance would always come back to you. It's just a matter of establishing a target in order to have enough fund balance for you guys to appropriate for use.
Is it gonna have its own line item? Says fund balance on it, or?
Well, no, if we're gonna utilize fund balance, you'll see where because those numbers are, like, if you see on here, we have use of fund balance. That's where we are using fund balance. So if we ask you to appropriate money to use fund balance, then yes, it would be part of the budget. We would have to get you to say, we're going to use the budget. You'd have to pass a resolution or budget amendment.
Yeah, so in this particular budget amendment right before the auditor's contract, on the page 2, that there are 2 appropriated fund balance line items. Those 2 that I talked about earlier, the workforce and homeless services appropriated fund balances. So this is where you've given us the authority to spend fund balance. I guess the difference is those are not general fund balances. Those are program specific.
Marty's raised his hand.
Marty, you have a question?
Yeah, I do. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I had to take a call and I may have missed some of this, but my point being is this. Let's say that we do worst case scenario. The question is going to be, is there anything we can cut now that'll be able to provide, or maybe you already covered it? Forgive me, I had to get off the call, but anyway, is it possible that we can cut something at least from a short period of time, like let's not hire somebody to do something if there's an opening or something like that. Have we considered those perspectives? I imagine you guys have, but I just wanted to ask.
Yeah, that's a good question, Marty, but the problem with a COG being very different from your organization and the most of you guys sitting around the table is that 75 probably percent or maybe 85% of our funding is reimbursement. So we can't get, if we don't spend the money, we don't get reimbursed for it. We don't keep the leftover appropriation. So there are very, very limited options for raising fund balance. And primarily it's not spending dues. That's more or less our best way. If local government services is extremely efficient in the contracts that it's contracting with its local governments and is able to bring in projects under budget, we can build a little bit of fund balance, but it's not usually going to be much. We're obviously not trying to overcharge our members for services we provide to them. So if we can bring it in under budget, it's great, but it's not going to be much. So primarily we're talking about dues. Dues are 1% of our budget or less. And so the options for building fund balance are extremely limited.
And what we have now is what we've been building over the years. Like this is AJ started this back, in the early around 2000, he started trying to build it up. So it's been slowly building as we go.
Yeah. Marty, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I can't fathom that this would be cut unless it's just something that's done as an oversight. But have we been able to get the legislative delegation or the congressional delegation rather to be able to give us some certainty that this is not, that it is protected, that we're not going to have this, or they're going to try to forward this upstream to ensure that this stays active? Because if you take the COGS offline, I can see it's going to be a lot of problems trying to spin it back up and having to do it from other perspectives. So just a thought.
Well, Marty, the staff has not done that, but we would encourage the elected officials who care about COGS to do that.
Well, yeah, we can. I mean, I just didn't know if anybody has reached out because, I mean, it's like you can reach out to, Ted Budd or to Tillis or Rouser or somebody and say, hey, can we get any kind of assurance? What I would like is not this, well, we'll look into it. I'll look at the weather. I don't want that. What I want is somebody who says, oh, it'd be insane to be able to cut the funding for COG. Let me see what I can do and I'll look back. That's the answer I want. I don't know that I'm going to get it, but that's my hope. We can get that kind of response at some level.
On that note, that the fund balance basically comes from dues, Alan and I have been looking for a year to figure out when was the last time dues were raised on the municipalities and the counties. No record of it exists.
April might have found it. It's been like 20-some years.
It's been decades since dues were raised. Now, if you look on page 6 back here, where it says member assessments.
Oh, on the budget, on the next item.
I mean, you can see it. There's going to come a point. We've been reluctant to do it.
It's going to be
couple of years.
It'll have to be self-funded, is what you're saying, right?
Pardon me, Marty.
You're saying it's going to have to be self-funded. There's no way around it because what's going to happen is Fed's going to cut the money and then it's going to come to the state. State's going to cut the money. And so then it's going to be in the local jurisdiction having to be able to support it. Is that basically what you're saying?
Yeah, basically another unfunded mandate.
Yeah, I get it. Thank you.
So we need to look at raising dues. I mean, if you look, nobody's paying a boatload of money. But
And honestly, that number that Mike pointed to you on page 6 of the budget includes the match that we charge the counties for the aging program
And our
services, and then the 3 of the 4 counties that are in the RPO for the RPO. So our dues are $82,000 a year or something. I mean, there's not a lot of money there to do much with.
So if we're gonna use that to try to increase our fund balance to cover our butt. At some point, these dues, and again, Alan and I have talked about it for the last 3 or 4 years. Raising dues, and we've been very reluctant to do it. But the day is probably coming where this is gonna have to be done. So just keep that in your mind that we may come to you and say, we're looking to raise dues across the 4 counties. I know that may happen. But where we are right now is still on the fund balance policy. Are there any more questions?
Go back to Roman numeral number 3.
Minimum.
We'll make every effort. Can we strike that and put, shall maintain? Do you have any objection to that, Alan?
Number 3.
He's saying to ensure financial stability, the council will make every effort.
So
He,
the only, here are my concerns with that. One is that, I mean, you guys effectively are the council, right? It's the elected officials, the decision makers. Situations where I can imagine, let's just say there is a need to spend fund balance on one of the situations we talked about earlier. I can imagine the fund balance then dipping below 25%. Or let's say we get a big program that we didn't have in the past, and all of a sudden our operating expenses go up. The dollar value of the fund balance is the same, but now the percentage has dropped. I can imagine scenarios where the fund balance percentage would go below 25%.
I think if you make it shall maintain, then what you will have to do is the moment you spend $1, you have to raise dues, whatever that amount is, which kind of defeats the purpose of the fund balance, right? I mean, the fund balance is that insurance policy that allows you to flex. If you say shall maintain, you take the flex out. In other words, you would have to raise dues.
And I don't know if we can raise dues mid-year. I suppose technically we can, but those local governments
Wouldn't be popular.
I mean, it won't be popular if it's not mid-year, but obviously those local governments have all budgeted their dues. I think my thought is that that's what fund balance is for, is to be able to use it when it's needed. And I think if it had to stay above 25%, it wouldn't allow us to spend much of it. Right now, we are above 25%, but not by all that much. So it wouldn't, the value of having the fund balance might be eliminated if there was no ability to spend it.
What would you spend it on?
I mean, it could be to maintain staff while we wait for a federal budget. It could be if a program is
Rent, utilities.
rent on utilities while we're waiting for a federal budget. It could be, I'm not sure about another scenario, but.
if you look at number 5, we've got fund balance restoration. So even if it does dip below the 25%, then our next would be to reestablish it. We're not talking about using it permanently.
I guess that's a good point, is the question of sort of what do we mean by maintain, right? Like, does that mean?
Yeah, there's got to be a minimum. There's got to be a standard, right? Or what are we not going to drop below? Regardless of what happens, we're counting, it sounds like we're counting eggs before they're hatched at this point, right? That's just my perception.
What do you mean by that?
Well, you're basing your budget on salaries. You don't know if you're going to get grants or not, right? You hope that you will.
I mean, most of our funds are recurring, but we never know if we're going to get the funds.
Right. So you're counting your eggs before they're hatched, and we have to have a minimum to be able to keep power on, keep salaries paid.
Well, there's the scenario where even if we furlough employees because there is no money for their program, we're still maintaining their benefits for a while.
We would still pay their health insurance, for
Right.
example.
So
I think the question is, if you want to maintain a 25% fund balance, it would be so that you would have a quarter's worth of funds to spend.
Mhm.
If you wanted to have a quarter's worth of funds to spend and not go below 25%, you would need a 50% fund balance. Yeah.
And then we would also need to maintain a certain amount, even, we're gonna have to spend a little bit to maintain. If a program was to, if, let's say, homeless, since you keep using homeless services, I'll use for Andrea's department. But we would, make sure that there might be another option we can use to keep them on. So we don't want to totally cut them off and then lose a good employee.
We might want to figure out if
We might
there's a
figure-
way to retool something.
Yes.
Or we may need to use fund balance if we've got an adopted budget and we've got our fixed fees that are coming in from our programs to pay Andrea's homeless services share of overhead. We may need fund balance to pay that share of indirect costs for a period of time. I just think
Now, we
the goal is to have 25% of fund balance so that you can go below 25% when it's needed.
And Alan and I talked about this when he gave it to me. There are certain expenditures that we probably, if it came to this point where we were getting to this, where we needed to call a board meeting and ask you guys if we could use it, we wouldn't be operating the same way that we're operating now. I mean, there probably would be some.
Staff wouldn't be traveling
Yes,
if their
there-
program is on hold.
Yeah, there would be expenses that are cut. I mean, we wouldn't maintain where we're at. We're talking about the bare minimum to make sure that.
That's a good point. So one of the things that Don and I talked about is whether the fund balance number that we give you guys is of what the expected operating expenses would be for a trimmed down organization or just our budgeted operating expenses. And my response to her was it just needs to be budgeted operating expenses. So it's always apples to apples. Because depending on how much the fiscal year you're through and like, I think we want to maintain this level of fund balance, but it would technically cover a little bit more than 25% of fund balance would cover a little bit more than 25% of the operating expenses because we would reduce the operating expenses. It's just that from a measurable standpoint, we want to measure it against current expenses. And that if we can be more efficient and cut out things like travel, we'll squeeze this, spread this out over longer. But we don't want to have to calculate that amount every time we report fund balance as a unique calculation. We want to calculate it based on a known number. And then if we get in that situation, we adjust.
And travel is, if you're wondering, travel is, in some of our departments, it is kind of significant because we have 4 counties. So if you have people driving back and forth to Columbus County every day, it's not, I wouldn't say significant, but it is a sizable number. We're not just talking about going on conference trips. We're talking about their day-to-day working.
Right, like the ombudsman who are every day at a long-term care facility, if their program got furloughed or all the programs got furloughed, then they wouldn't be going on those trips, those work trips. And so we wouldn't have those, we don't have a motive pool. We just reimburse personal vehicles. So there would be an opportunity to cut some of those expenses, but not that many others.
Yeah. We run pretty bare bones right now. I mean, we're not very extravagant.
I think it worked. I mean, because I think it's fiscally responsible to have fund balance.
The other thing I'll say is this is our first ever fund balance policy. So like, I think it'd be a good idea to implement it. If there are tweaks along the way, we find in the future that we need to make amendments to it. then we'll do it.
Need approval?
I think, one more thing, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
I think what I would ask, you and maybe the other board members agree or don't, is to find what the minimum is. Is it 25% or what the bare bones necessity need to be able to operate, right? Like you said. Is it 25%? I don't know. that may be a question or something later on down the road, but
I mean, I think it's a theoretical question.
Yeah, I mean,
I
'cause
think the
that-
question is, how long do you want to be able to operate
Yeah.
without any income coming in? Like, it's not
well,
really.
it says a quarter, so we'll just use a quarter, right? Does that give people time if you do have to furlough, to carry their salary on until they find another job or start collecting unemployment? I don't know that.
I think it depends on the situation.
Yeah.
And,
So if you prepare or you plan for the worst and you hope, or, you know, if you plan for the worst and hope for the best, gotta meet in the middle.
The biggest problem, as I'm hearing it, seeing it, the only way we can build the fund balance is out of dues. So where are you gonna get the money? I understand exactly what you're saying. But where are we gonna get the money to build the fund balance? Because the dues are barely cutting it. As you said, it's only 1%.
it's 1% of the total budget, not of the
Right, right.
operating budget. I will say that.
And we currently have 25% in there. I mean, it's not,
Right.
we're at that goal right now.
Right.
But if the emergency that you keep fund balance for were to happen, you would have to dip below 25%. And so I think that's where you want the flexibility of, we'll make every effort to maintain rather than shall maintain,
Yes.
so that you can actually use it.
Because if it says shall, we can't drop below 25% at all, correct? Is that what that,
Yeah.
if I'm understanding it?
That's correct.
Okay.
I would think that the purpose.
Which
of
means
that-
you would shut down, turn off the lights, the last person out the door, and it'd still be 25% of the
Uh-huh.
balance.
Right.
Didn't do you any good.
That's exactly right.
Didn't do you any good because nobody here to spend it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Any other question? And I would need a motion to accept the fund balance policy,
So moved.
or B, and who second?
Right.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
May I request a bathroom break?
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you is here, we've been going for an hour and a half. Could we take a short break and maybe people can get their lunch before we go over the budget, or did you want to wait till?
Yeah, and we can eat during.
During the budget
Or
presentation?
you guys can. I don't.
Yeah.
Because that's so exciting.
Yes.
But yes, I think a restroom break and we'll just sort of pause
You wanna pause
use the
till,
restroom, grab our food and
Was till
reconvene.
1 o'clock?
Well, you don't need that long.
Yeah. Brenda's got a little call. Good
We-
call. Good call. On your drink.
All right, let's take a 10-minute,
Yeah, bring it in.
back at 10 to 1.
Great.
We
By the
are,
way, one of the most hotly contested thing in every organization is what should that fund balance be?
yeah.
It's on all time.
Okay, we are on a
Do it.
10-minute break.
Any storms that want me to be able to survive.
Thank goodness we don't have that responsibility.
Yeah, you don't, but we do.
I know, so like our fund balance does not have to cover emergency response.
Yeah.
Well, Started again?
Yeah.
I was waiting for Alan to finish eating.
Thank you, Mike.
She's doing all of it. All right, let's bring it back. Were we on online?
Yep, you're live.
Okay. All right. So we are now about to have a budget presentation. Excuse me. Alan, all yours, buddy.
Thanks, Mike. All right, so everybody in your packets, you've got our proposed budget for next fiscal year. I'm gonna probably reiterate a number of things that we have said on several occasions already in some of the other agenda items that preceded this. But you know, as you know, the great bulk of our funds are federal and state funds. The great bulk of our funds are on a reimbursement basis, and so largely they are restricted funds that we are fulfilling some type of grant or other program restriction with. You know, the reality is even a large portion of the great bulk of our local funds are restricted funds. They're either matched for federal programs, which have federal restrictions. They might be, for example, in Andrea's case, contributions from City of Wilmington, New Hanover County, Pender County, Brunswick County to operate the homeless continuum of care program, and those funds are only used for that purpose. You know, Wes is contracting with local governments to provide various technical assistance services for them, and those funds go towards those services and can't be redirected towards other means. And so in some ways, the budget writes itself, right? We have a good idea what the revenues are going to be. We know what those revenues are for, and our expenditures will match that. This fiscal year, we are proposing an appropriation of $11,119,718. That is a 9% decrease from the appropriation that you guys adopted this time last year. It is in fact, not just 9%, but $1.1 million reduction. Now, the great majority of those funds are the expiration of one-time special project dollars, primarily ARPA funds. And so in lots of different departments, we received ARPA allocations for special pandemic-related responses. And as those program dollars get spent down and as those program funds expire, there are not, you know, other funds to replace them. So that's why we're primarily seeing a reduction. It is not really a reduction in our recurring programs. This is just a renormalizing from back to pre-COVID program numbers for the most part. The only real exception to that is that in the Homeless Services Department, we did have that permanent supportive housing program that you have heard me mention before, had been operated by a community partner for a number of years. That community partner did not apply to HUD to continue that program. So it was requested that the COG submit for that application to HUD to ensure that the program funds stayed in the community and that we would find a community partner to transfer those funds to. And
4 years later, we finally found a community partner who was willing to take the funds. And so in this past the fiscal year we are in currently, we successfully transferred that program to another partner agency, but because of that, those funds are no longer in next year's budget. So that's the great majority of the reduction in homeless services. All of the revenues that we are budgeting at this point, as we've said several times, are pretty uncertain. So our area agency on aging revenues are assuming similar allocations as this current fiscal year. Obviously, if that changes, then we'll have to adjust. Homeless services is really much more grant-based, and we have received, I don't know what the term would be. We don't have our grant award letters, but they are, the funding amounts have technically been approved. So those are more known numbers. Local government services is a mix of multi-year stuff and recurring programs. And there are a number of things that are either concluding or have concluded that are not in next year's budget. And so that's why you see a pretty sharp decline in local government services dollars. Workforce development, that is really just because our funding agency at the state has told everybody, not just us, that we should be budgeting for 10% reduction. And so we're doing that. We did that last year, and I think they gave us more than we had the previous year, and came back to you guys to increase the allocation. And so we are budgeting in that particular case, with 10% contingency, essentially being conservative because that's what they're recommending.
And they've done that multiple years.
That's their MO. Yes, they ask us, they tell us we're going to get a reduction, and then they give us more money, and it's fine. General government has an increase. That's largely because we have tended in the past not to budget interest because it varies so much. And also there was a long time when interest rates were so low that it really wasn't that much money anyway. And so it didn't really matter. So, this year we're going to be budgeting interest. And so that's why we have a little bit of increase there, which does give us a little bit of wiggle room. Overhead indirect costs are up 7%. That's we just, it's general inflation, personnel costs, things of that nature. Personnel, 22% of our budget is salary and fringe. We are proposing a 2% cost of living adjustment. That is because the most recent CPI for the Southeast that I saw was 1.9%. So we're proposing a 2% cost of living. One of the things that we're proposing is, going to be inconsistent with our personnel policy, but based on the presentation earlier, we're talking about adjusting that. In order to make this budget work, we were only able to allow a maximum of 1.5% merit, just because numbers are tight. And so, if the budget is approved, it would be contingent upon, or that merit would be, and merit always, again, doesn't come until our November pay period. So
Neither does the COLA, doesn't either.
Neither does COLA, but we would have to adjust our personnel policy by November or by October, really, in order to implement the maximum 1.5% merit. And I guess I've noted that. That is the great bulk of my budget presentation. Most of our great bulk of our funds are pass-through funds. 28% of our budget is operating revenue. The rest of it is passed through primarily to our county aging departments or to our workforce development contractors. And that is all I have, I guess, on the budget narrative. You will see on page 4, the comparative budget analysis, which compares our funding that we're proposing this year with what it was when we proposed it to you last year. And you can see how each of those little individual line items are affected. Page 6 of the budget is our member assessments, which, as I mentioned, it's $179,000 worth of dues and match. About 80-something thousand dollars of which is actually dues.
Alan, can we
Yes.
just talk real quick about dues?
Please.
Because I know that is, there's potentially room to grow, like you said, Mike. Probably not a good idea to talk about it this budget year because we're so close to the end of budget season, but like, can we prepare maybe to discuss at the next meeting, the potential for a rise?
We, as I said earlier, Alan and I have talked about this for 3 or 4 years at least. If we were gonna do, if we were gonna increase dues, that letter would probably have to go out in early to mid-November. So that your managers or finance officers could have the heads up that it's coming before the municipalities and counties get involved in their budget, so they know what their number is.
And I don't think it's technically required, but I would think we would want to present this at the annual meeting in February to the membership as well.
Okay.
Here's the challenges though with raising dues. If we doubled our dues, which nobody would go for, we would raise $80,000 additional dollars, which is not that much. Secondly, we have a number of our smallest jurisdictions that have difficulty with their budgets anyway. We have a number of our sort of mid-tier jurisdictions, which I feel like are the ones that utilize us the most and probably need us the most. They've got staff that can reach out, they need help, et cetera. And then we've got our biggest jurisdictions that have plenty of staff and typically need us less. So I've spent not a lot of time, but I have spent some time trying to figure out the math of how to raise dues primarily on the middle tier. It's not that easy, but that's part of the complication. But even still, I think the challenge we'll face is that even a significant percentage increase in dues wouldn't have a major impact on the budget.
I'm just hoping that we would just at least discuss it.
Yeah.
As a group. I mean, it's not gonna be easy, but to your point, there should be a purpose for doing it.
It's gonna have to happen at some point. We've been kicking this can down the road for a while. And I don't know, we've gone back and forth constantly. Fairest thing in my a percentage, like maybe a 30%. I mean, I got towns, we have towns, like for me in Brunswick County, Sandy Creek, what do they pay, like $300, not even. I mean, it's
$352.
I mean, even a 30% increase is, $90. But understand, these numbers haven't been stagnant for 30 years because they pay based on population.
So as the population increases, the dollar value increases, but that, whether the population increases keeping up with inflation and whether the larger population is giving us additional responsibilities, that are, as the region is growing.
So they're unrestricted, less restricted funds.
The dues, the match, so again, in that number, there's dues and match, but the dues portion is completely unrestricted. The match obviously is.
Perhaps maybe the.
Excuse me, Marty has raised his hand again.
Marty, you have a question?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think it just got covered. Are you doing it based on population or how's this being done, Alan?
Yes, population.
Yeah, it's based on population and it would always be in some way based on population. It's just a matter of what that formula looks like.
Well, I'm wondering if, we could have a conversation with these different jurisdictions and say to them, look, we're probably going to lose our funding that we have. We need to go up, and maybe they understand that. I mean, it's a force multiplier because COG does things that, a lot of times these jurisdictions would have to do themselves. So maybe there is a conversation that could be done with some of these guys. I don't know, just a thought.
I'm trying not to be quite as dire, Marty, as you are. I'm hoping that our funding is gonna be maintained, but I guess
Well,
we
me
still don't
too.
know.
I hope too as well. I'm these days I'm just wondering what's going to get cut, and what isn't. But I have to tell you that I'm a little calloused here because the thing about it is it looks like the Fed just sidesteps everything. Then what happens? They trickle it down the state. The state does the same thing, and then it's on us. And that's what we feel like it's regressive. But anyway, I'll
Yeah,
get
I mean,
off the
we're
soapbox.
in, we're in an interesting position where, the COG was established by the municipalities and counties in the 4 counties in order to perform these types of regional tasks, multi-jurisdictional tasks.
Exactly.
But the great bulk of our money is not coming from those jurisdictions. It's coming from the state and federal government. And so, the value is certainly felt locally, but it's being funded from outside the region primarily.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Thank you. And so on
Just real quick, and
Yeah, please.
I know this is a long meeting, but I think another point, many years ago, the state also allocated direct funds to our council of governments. That came to an end by 15 years ago or something.
more, yes, there were statewide planning funds that were given to COGS, probably even a lot longer ago than that. So there's no direct state support for just, broad COG operations. Any support would be program specific. And often, especially from a state perspective, except for some of the aging funds, any state funds we get typically are non-recurring funds. And so, it's very difficult to sustain an organization on funds that are non-recurring. Sometimes it feels like it's not even worth it to spin up a program for a year or two and then spend down the money and then stop providing the service and release the staff. So at the end of your packets, we've got the budget ordinance, which will be for your consideration next month at the board meeting. And so that brings me to the I guess it doesn't bring me to setting the public hearing. It brings me to the conclusion of my presentation of the budget, and I will open it up to questions that you guys may have at this point. I will reiterate, when we know more about the funding levels, we will obviously retool and we will come back to you. As you know, we are a public entity just like you guys. We don't have an adopted budget by July 1. We can't operate. And so, as has typically been the case, I would say there's certainly more uncertainty now than normal, but it is always the case where there's uncertainty. We adopt the budget knowing that there will be an amendment coming at the next meeting or the following meeting once things are more well known. But that you should also feel, rest assured that, just because you appropriate the funds, if we don't believe we've got those revenues, we're not going to be spending them. So that's that.
Okay, any questions for Alan on the budget? Really?
I mean, we've been looking at it all.
Yeah,
I mean, pretty much, haven't we?
well, if there are no questions, and I'm stalling in case somebody thinks of something, then what do you say we,
There's no action required.
yeah, there's no action at this moment, but we do have to set a public hearing for this. our next one. So, as you know, it's a budget, so there has to be a public hearing. I don't believe in the years I've been on this, anybody has ever come online or sent us a letter about our budget.
The only public comment, if we've ever had a public comment, it was been from one of our delegates who's
Yeah.
not a voting member of the executive committee. They're just an interested delegate.
Yep. So I will take a motion to set the public hearing date for June the 9th.
So moved.
Jan?
Second.
Mike Walker. And Steph. All those in favor?
Aye.
Asked, thank you. All right, the pay plan amendment, Alan.
So first of all, I will apologize. It just occurs to me, the pay plan is technically a 3-page document and only page 2 is in here. The first page is a cover page, so that's not too big of a deal. And the last page is the pay scale, the chart, which Matt showed you in the presentation and which is not proposed to be changed. So that is not it's while I apologize that it wasn't included, it's not particularly relevant at this point. There are no changes to that. So all we're really doing here, and this is to be effective July 1st, all we're really doing at this point in the pay plan is we are eliminating positions that we no longer have or will no longer have. And adding a position that I will explain to you to begin July 1st, and then just changing a title from project manager to project 1, project manager 2. We had budgeted and never really just taken it out of the budget originally to have 1.5 senior planners on staff, and we only ended up bringing on the half person. And so we don't need that full-time senior planner at this time. So we are removing that on grade 18. On grade 15, the business services representative. This is a position we had. It was part-time and temporary, and was primarily related to some workforce ARPA-related grant funds that we're performing that work with existing staff, and that person is no longer with us, and so we're not proposing to refill that position, and so we're removing it from the pay plan. And then finally, the project manager 1. So the half position we're removing is a former employee who retired and was working in our ARPA program. And we have ARPA funds that are eligible through October of 2027. Is that right?
2026.
Right, October of 2026. So for all of this upcoming fiscal year and then another quarter beyond it. And we are proposing to have our absolutely fantastic Lead for North Carolina fellow, Danny, who's sitting over there in the corner, who is currently technically a contractor through the School of Government. We are proposing to bring him on full-time temporarily for a year. He's already spending a lot of time working on the ARPA grant. And so we're proposing to bring him on full-time while those funds are available in order to continue that work, because on June 31st, his fellowship with us ends. And frankly, there are sufficient funds to bring him on. He's doing a fantastic job, and we want to make sure that the services that we're providing to our member jurisdictions with those funds are able to continue. And as is the case with a lot of our funding, so that is because it's grant funding that's term limited, that position is also term limited. So that is the nature of the proposed pay plan amendment. I'd like to get it approved now so that we can know that there's a position available in June and start working towards making it filled. getting.
Got a motion from Brenda. Do I have a second?
Second.
Who was that? Jim?
It was a tie.
She's close. You got to me quick.
It's better years on that side.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. Well, before I thought that was on, but it's more. I'll tell them later. I don't want to embarrass them. All right, board member attendance policy, Alan?
So as you guys probably remember, we discussed board member attendance policy at our last meeting, and you guys asked me to bring you one. And so here is a draft proposed attendance policy. I took the liberty of expanding it to delegates as well, because we really need them to come to the annual meeting so that we can get our business done at the annual meeting as well. And so this is my proposal. Obviously, this is a policy that affects you guys, and it is something that you guys are going to need to provide feedback and either agree or want to have some changes or what have you. You know, basically what we're doing is we're creating two categories of absences, excused absences and unexcused absences. Basically, an unexcused absence is when you just don't let us know why, you know, if and why you can't be there, and we are surprised to see that you're not at the meeting. Whereas an excused absence is, you know, primarily for, you know, illness and medical related things, funerals, birth, and military service. And that may, you know, we may need to, you know, if we want to give additional of excused absences, we may. You know, obviously the point is to be able to make quorum. And we've made note that, you know, if you can't make a meeting, we expect you to attend remotely, but that remote participation doesn't count towards a quorum. And it's still, you know, for these purposes of the attendance policy, it's still considered an absence. And so you can have one excused absence in a 12-month period. And if you have more than one, what we're proposing is that you wouldn't be eligible to serve on the executive committee for the following term. And then you are allowed to have two consecutive, if you have two consecutive unexcused absences, you'll be considered to have resigned, and that there'll be a vacancy that the board will fill pursuant to the bylaws. If there is more than two consecutive absences, whether excused or unexcused, in 12 months, then you wouldn't be eligible to serve on the executive committee for the following term. And more than three absences, whether excused or unexcused, would be considered to have resigned and create a vacancy. And then to help everybody comply, the clerk is going to notify the member and the chair anytime somebody's at risk of automatic resignation or ineligibility and that kind of thing, so that people are fully aware of where they stand and able to avoid any of these consequences if they're not able to attend or can make themselves able to attend. Any questions?
Marty has a question.
Hey, yeah, question. Did you say, Alan, that if an individual was zooming in but couldn't be there, that was considered to be an absence? Is that right?
Well, because they don't count towards quorum, and the whole purpose of this policy really is to ensure that we can hold meetings, then yes, that's what it says. Although I realize that that is difficult.
It's very difficult because, all right, I'm in a thing called the JCPC. They don't do any distance at all. I've had to miss half their meetings. It's obligatory you go to them, but I've had to miss them. I've had to be out of town. Sometimes elected officials have to be in Raleigh. So what do? Do I say, okay, I got to run back to a COG meeting because I got to be a member of this thing, but I got to run right back to Raleigh? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. I get the quorum aspect, but I think it needs to be a little bit more lenient than that because the individual is using their best efforts. It isn't like they're not trying to participate. And I'm not on the executive committee, I'm just an alternate, but that's my 2 cents. I think you need to make it more lenient than that. I can see it that if you didn't even show up, wasn't in the Zoom or anything like that, I get that. But it needs to be more lenient. Sometimes people really can't get out of the meetings. Like sometimes we have county meetings that are obligatory. We have to be in those and we can't get out of them. So, and I don't know about other individuals that are here that are elected, but it's not just like, well, I had something better to do. It's not like that. That's just my perspective.
I completely understand. I will say that we only meet 6 times a year and you are allowed 3 absences without, creating a vacancy at least if they're excused. And so that is a pretty low bar. 50% attendance is a pretty low bar. I think it's.
Well, I guess that works. Okay,
I was thinking.
I thought it was 1. I thought if you missed 1, you're in trouble. Okay,
No.
3 then. Okay,
So the
fine.
executive committee.
And Marty, you're an alternate. You don't count towards the quorum.
I know, I don't count anyway.
Yeah, you're not even supposed to be
I'm
voting.
chopped liver. I got it, baby. I know.
I got-
Well, Alan, I was gonna propose one thing and see what the group thinks about it. I rather than try to list, I'm fine with this list. I think the A, B, C, D under executive committee members is probably covers 99% of the reasons someone would be absent. But I was gonna throw out, I would probably propose an E on there that was left some wiggle room for the board to, or as approved by the board. Only because what are we not thinking about? What's the situation? Obviously, if you come in here and say, hey, can I be excused? I got this really good deal on a cruise. That's probably not going to be approved.
I don't know, it works.
But you see what I
Sounds
mean?
pretty good, actually.
I just think if you had or as approved by the board, I can't think of what the crazy thing is, but something's happened and I can't, I don't know what the situation would be. Life happens.
Life happens.
I would like the board to have the option to excuse someone for if there's a good enough reason that might not be fall into those 4.
Well, the reality is now that I'm thinking about it, if you have a conflict, legitimate conflict, work related, like to your elected official business, just simply notifying in advance of that does not make it excused under these law rules. So I think giving the ability for the board to decide, for example, that this conflict does qualify, but it also gives the board the flexibility that if somebody continues to have a conflict, you wouldn't necessarily have to grant every single conflict.
Right. So if you had a sort of what Marty was talking about, if you're on another board, you're serving both of them, but that board has some meeting that you're required to be at. You can't be in 2 places. I would think that would be a pretty good story for this board to say, hey, I'm not serving. I'm not on vacation. I didn't take a mental health day. I'm really trying to do the best I can.
I'll tell you that my budget meetings are on a Monday. So it could have easily happened that this Monday would have been a scheduled budget meeting. Fortunately, we got it all in last week. But had we not finished everything last Monday, the rest of it would have gone to today.
So I would ask, how often is the schedule put out? Is it an annual schedule for all the meetings?
Yeah, the board adopts the schedule for the next fiscal year. I'm sorry, for the next calendar year at the December meeting.
Plan accordingly. That's what I said. The last time.
Right, which we all try to do, but life happens.
There are a number of meetings that people get scheduled for that they are not scheduling the meeting.
Yeah.
Quite often.
So, Mike and I have an alternate that if we can't be there, they show up for us.
Right. Like Marty's my alternate.
But technically only as
The delegate.
the delegate at the annual meeting. Because remember, when the executive committee members are elected at the annual meeting by the general membership, it's by name.
Right,
Right.
okay.
And I think that's because we don't have 100% representation on the board. It wouldn't be fair that, for example, if Lynn Can't makes it, that instead of his alternate at Carolina Beach coming, well, why couldn't Wrightsville Beach or Curie Beach have come? Why couldn't Wilmington have come? They're also members of the COG. So I think it's at the executive committee level, it really does make more sense that it's the
So
person,
basically.
not the
we don't need
alternate.
an option.
I mean, you're supposed to come to the executive committee meetings,
do.
the annual meetings also, right? So for those executive committee members, it is likely that their alternate is less important than anyone else's.
So
Last,
I
was just gonna say, like, last Monday, I didn't choose, we were told, hey, you're gonna meet with Tillis and Bud last Monday. That's your day. So if it would have been a day, I wouldn't be here today.
Right.
I was told that's when I had to show up. It was just popped up, this your day. Our next meeting, I know it's on my calendar. I will be here, but just so you know, I'm coming from the country music festival that morning. There's no telling what I'm like.
Might be just a little bit.
You're gonna look like you came from a country.
But there are items that come up like that you're just like, I did not plan to go to DC, last
I
Monday.
serve on 15 committees. I chair 4. So everything with me is tentative. Because things change all the time. I mean, right down, I'm on the board of directors for the hospital. Things occur, and they say, we need a board meeting right away.
Well, I can give you an example. Hurricane hits Carolina Beach, state of emergency.
That's a whole nother.
That's not on the list. That's my point.
Yeah, but then none of us would be here.
Well, maybe it was PTCA. Not all of us
Yeah.
are impacted as much.
Not like I was in BSF.
So I think your amendment is a good one, and I think that makes a lot of good sense. Is there any other comment?
C, did you mean the birth or adoption? Because
Yep, I did.
Oh, good catch.
I have a question in number 3. It says in advance of the meeting, notification in advance. I mean, is there a time frame, like 48 hours,
Should be.
24 hours? It's got to be some expectations, like 5 minutes for the meeting or something. Only because what is a quorum for this meeting?
5.
5, okay.
You know what? As a follow-up to Steph's question, I travel here from Brunswick County. Can't get here without crossing a bridge. What if I'm on my way and I got an 18-wheeler across the highway on 17? I can't get here. And I call you up and say, got a problem? Doesn't look like I'm gonna make it. And if I do, I want to be at least 45 minutes late. What happens in a case like that?
Well, as long as you don't have that happen at 2 consecutive meetings. Or 3 meetings. Or 4 meetings in a 12-month period.
I mean, I'm here a half hour early because I always have to compensate for a bridge going up.
Actually, more than 2 consecutive meetings, or more than 3 in a 12-month period. The problem is and the board would, assuming Lynn's amendment, the board would excuse that.
Right.
And should, unless he's making it up.
But we'll verify.
That's a phone call.
Lays out.
Let me call the highway patrol and see that. But I think that the opportunity to give the board the flexibility to make an exception is probably the most important component of this, because we haven't tried this yet, and we haven't calibrated it, and we need to see if it's too strict or not strict enough. And giving the board the flexibility to make variations, I think is critical.
So leave advance more vague.
So
Whether it's 5 minutes or.
Oh,
so we're adding an E.
All right, let me ask you a question. Are you guys having a problem with attendance?
Not lately.
So
It's been tight.
the problem has been, Marty, that we very recently, our legal counsel informed us that there's a very good chance that we cannot count remote participation towards a quorum. And we have probably been a little reliant on that in the past. And so that really, this is about making sure that we have enough people in the room, and that there's been recent court, or I think it was a court case that sort of clarified, at least some, makes us think that the evidence suggests that we can't conduct business without a quorum in the room.
And my apology is just occurring to me. I probably shouldn't even be interacting because I'm the alternate, so I should just keep my mouth shut and just sit here and listen.
I was gonna talk to you about it later. I didn't want to embarrass you.
I'll hush. All right.
I just figured out who Marty is. Marty and I had dinner last week and I'm sitting here going, that voice is familiar. I just put two and two together.
You guys went byway together.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so how are we wording E?
Or otherwise as approved by the board, by a majority of the board?
But then how would they make that decision at that meeting?
At the meeting,
Okay.
yeah. So they wouldn't know beforehand if it was approved or not.
Right.
There's a quorum.
And Alan and the board, I hate to further beat this horse, but the item on having 2 consecutive absences, whether excused or unexcused. I want to make sure that the board's aware of that. That could be, I mean, that would further restrict future participation in the executive committee.
Right, it wouldn't affect you during the current term.
Right.
But it would make.
Could be restrictive.
I think that's okay.
Okay.
Right,
It is likely that if you miss 2 consecutive meetings, that you don't have the availability to properly serve anyway. But you're right, that should be highlighted, at least that people understand that it does say that. We only do meet 6 times a year, so.
So you missed 2/3 of the meetings and back to back.
Back to back, yeah.
Yeah.
1/3.
1/3, yeah.
Yes, thank you. Math was my major, you'd think.
I didn't read, but is the annual dinner included? I mean, the annual meeting included in this as well, or is it just executive committee members?
So there's different language for the delegates for attending the annual meeting, and they're expected to attend in person, and that or they're either going to attend or notify their alternate. And if the delegate and alternate are not in attendance, then that'll just be a factor used by the nominating committee when considering executive committee members next time. So
there's really no punishment for a delegate.
This is really geared to this day.
Make sure we can have these meetings.
Yeah.
But
I would just say.
technically, the annual meeting does not count as executive committee meeting, and technically, if you couldn't make that.
That counts like 2
it wouldn't-
consecutive.
It would not count, but executive committee members are still expected to attend.
Sure, you do
the annual
business
meeting.
at it.
But we can do business because the quorum at the annual meeting is everybody, not just executive committee meetings. We don't technically need a quorum of executive committee members to hold an annual meeting.
But did you get the wording for E?
Yes, sir, I was just about to verify. So for E.
Have, as otherwise approved by the executive committee. How's that?
And are we leaving the vagueness of the
Oh.
advance of the meeting notification?
Yeah, what is, Stephanie had asked that question, what's advance of the, is it, can I send you an email from the bridge and say I'm not gonna make it? Does that count as advance notice, or is it 24 hours?
I think in the case of tractor trailer that's overturned on the highway, you're not going to give 24-hour notice.
Right.
That would be possible.
April usually confirms everything on the Friday, so.
Yeah.
I would say when she calls and does a confirmation, I know I don't have any, I'm just saying that since she already does that, that would be where that notice would kind of come in now in an emergency situation, then that would have to be handled that day.
The reality is it's probably unlikely that somebody would have lots of unexcused absences unless they're just not coming.
And again, it would fall under E as approved by the board.
And there have been times where board members have called me day of saying,
Yeah.
this has happened, I can't.
If they don't call, then it's not eligible on the list of excuses.
But even if it's A, right? I mean, you could have got sick 5 minutes before you left the house.
That's right.
Hey, you can get a
And if
rip
you
on the way here.
did, don't come.
Exactly.
April sent us emails like, can you please RSV, like confirm? So you need to know at least, but you can do your work. I mean,
We
you need
didn't know if there's a quorum.
a week. I mean, we don't have to put that in there, but I'm just saying, of course, that's what you do.
And I can always put a blurb in and just remind them of the attendance policy.
That's good.
It's just good to know ahead, barring any emergency, that there's gonna be a forum here. Because why me?
Yeah, we don't want you guys to travel, especially those of you that travel great distances,
Mhm.
if there's not gonna be a quorum,
Mhm.
especially if we know there's not.
Yeah.
Or if we should have known because we were told by folks who weren't planning on coming.
And there have been times where we've had to postpone the meeting for not having a
Right.
quorum, so.
I mean, technically, you can meet and not vote. It's not an official meeting.
We've done that.
Yeah,
Motion that we accept with the changes.
All right, Brenda,
Second.
Jan, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Well, we got a long ways to go, almost 2:00. All right, gang staff reports, Alan, Executive Director's report.
All right, I'm gonna try to breeze through this, guys. So in your packet is the contract summary. I've explained it, what the purpose of this is in the past, so I'm not gonna do it again. These are the contracts we have entered into since the last time I reported it to you. If you have any questions, let me know. Hopefully I can make this one quick. The Southeast Crescent Regional Commission is a federal program that is supposed to have no match. We have it's not a whole lot of money, but it still allows us to do some good work for our communities. We have recently found out that buried in the agreement that we signed, they are capping our fringe rate and our indirect cost rate, both of which are capped below our actual fringe and indirect cost rates. And so we have estimated that in order to finish this current program year that we're in now, we would probably there's probably about $800 or $900 of cost that would not be covered by the program that we're proposing to cover by dues. It amounts to like a 5% local match, which I think you would take that deal all day long in advance if you knew it, but we didn't know it in advance. And so I think part A of my request is just sort of, I think technically, by the way, that the authorizations you guys gave me, I'm allowed to commit dues to that. It doesn't exceed our dues amount. It doesn't require fund balance. But I just want to make sure that you guys, we don't typically do this, that you guys are on board with me applying $1,000 or so of dues towards the $24,000, I think, that were awarded for this program.
And into the budget, we do that.
I think it makes sense to make a 5% match on federal dollars, but I just wanted to make sure, and it does apply across all 4 counties. So I think I'm not looking for any action, just if, unless anybody thinks that that's not a good idea, I want to make sure we don't move forward with it if it's going to be a problem. I think the bigger question is they are thinking about changing. They had a lot of pushback about their thresholds, their limits that I think, the great bulk of the what are called local development districts, which is what we're considered for that program, have higher indirect and fringe rates than their caps. So they are thinking about changing it into because right now it's what they call it a cooperative agreement is the way that our relationship is with them. If they change it to a grant, the federal law that gives them their funding will make a required match. Now, the required match depends on whether it's a distressed county, a transitional county, or whatever. And so I don't know how you would calculate our match, but let's just say that there is a 20% or 30% local match on these SCRC funds. The commission wants me to give feedback as to whether we would still participate. So, 20% local match, that's pretty standard for federal funds. I think, we could handle that. Any more than that, I'm not sure. And now, even if we do, we're just dipping into dues, which we've already talked about being a limited resource.
It is a small amount of funds.
It's a small amount of funds, so the match isn't that much money. It is very flexible, so it allows us to do a lot to help your communities. I think it's probably still worth it, but I want to let you guys know about it and make sure you feel comfortable. I will also say, if during the process we determine that it does not seem like it is worthwhile, we can always bring it back to you and propose that we stop spending those funds, stop that commitment. But I think I'm looking for your blessing that I commit $1,000 of dues for this year, and some indication of whether, if it goes up to 20%, do we still want to participate?
Will it require a motion, or you just want?
I just want consensus. We haven't accepted yet the funds that would have a match, so that can come back to you. But they want an indication of whether we think we would even participate.
Yes. I'm good with it.
Okay.
I'm good.
We can always change our mind later. I think it's easier to say yes than no.
I have faith in staff.
All right. The only other thing I wanted to bring up is something that Mike and I had talked about. Back during COVID, I had presented to you guys a memorandum stating a sort of contingency plan, or really almost like a succession plan. If something were to happen to me, because during COVID at the very, I don't know if you remember the beginning of COVID, we weren't sure how bad it was going to be. Of who would be in charge of the COG in my temporary or permanent absence or disability. And after talking about it with Mike, and it seems unlikely now that there would be something that would be so catastrophic that we would have to have a whole line of succession. So my thought is that, either the board or Mike individually, if something happens to me, can just figure out who is in charge, and I should then, we can rescind this long list that includes 6 staff members, 2 of which don't even work here anymore.
Where did you even find the list?
I don't know where I ran across it. I found the file at some point. I know it might have been in one of April's board approved packets.
Personally, I think you should name positions as opposed to individual people, because that way that's what we did for the signatory. Instead of saying Don, Mike, and Alan are going to be signatories on our bank account, it said executive committee chair.
So what I'm proposing is that we not even name anybody, that we just let the executive, I mean, Mike has the authority to sign checks in my absence. I don't think there are any other pressing decisions that would need to get made that we couldn't have an emergency meeting for if we didn't need to. It's not very likely to happen,
Yeah,
so
and
I'm not too worried about it.
that only happened, what was that, 2 summers ago? I suppose.
But that was just signing checks. I was
Right.
still working.
Right. I would come in weekly and sign checks. They would dump a stack in front of, and I'm telling you, it was a stack. And I would sign all of these checks. Otherwise, your municipalities or counties would not have gotten the money. So it was a temporary thing while he was in Florida caring for his dad, who was quite ill at the time.
This policy was developed assuming I'm like on a ventilator at a hospital and nobody knows what to do about it.
And if something like that would have happened, I'm sure we would have.
We would have a board meeting.
We would have to have a board meeting, but you'd have to name an interim executive director anyway to deal with all that.
We would call an emergency meeting. And we would sit here and say, okay, Alan's out, he'll probably be out for 2 months. you know, and he's not gonna be able to work remotely or from home, with that kind of thing. Who do we want to run this ship in his absence? And we would determine it around this table.
Rather than having it predefined,
Yeah.
and then when somebody leaves, it's out of date and all that kind of thing. So I would just rescind this list. Or you would.
Everybody good with that?
Mhm.
Do you need a motion to rescind that?
I think it technically says that I did, it's an executive order, so I guess I
You can rescind.
did it, so I can rescind it. Just want to make sure that you're good with that.
I'm good.
All right, that's all I have. I'm gonna let us try to get out of here.
All right, moving on. Holly, area on aging?
Good afternoon. I will try to be very quick because I know it's late in the day. We have monitored all of our counties, so the Brunswick Senior Resources, Columbus County Department of Aging, New Hanover County Senior Resource Center, and Pender Adult Services have all been visited, and they all did great. We had one organization that just needed a reminder to use the most recent intake forms that we have from the Division of Aging. We are currently being fiscally monitored, and we have sent everything up to her, and I have no doubts that it will be perfect, and there'll be no issues with that. Family Caregiver Support Program was monitored on Friday by the Division of Aging, and there were no findings. Candace does a fabulous job with that program. And she has a conference planned for caregivers on May 16th in Navassa. Our ombudsmen are staying super busy. They each have over 2,000 clients or beds within our region, and they are out answering calls and mediating complaints and providing education on residents' rights for all of the staff. Dana's our project care person, and she has depleted all of the vouchers for that Caregivers Alternatives to Running on Empty state-supported program. And she is scheduled through June with home visits, but she covers 12 counties. So she is on the road most of the time. We just allocated out our Choosing Home funds, which are state fiscal recovery funds, to each one of the lead agencies, which are the same ones I just mentioned, to provide some fairly flexible funding to persons to help keep them in their homes. It can help with utilities, it can help with home improvement. But, and I hate to say but it's only $51,463 per county. So you can imagine how quickly that will be spent after all the disasters that we have in our region. But great though. I mean, so awesome to have that money to help folks. We will be doing proposal for our state fiscal recovery funds, providing elders additional substance food assistance in the next week or two. And that's about $33,000 per county. And it's just additional meals or an additional food box to your most high-risk older adults in the counties. So we've been super busy. I visited the Holden Beach Chapel ladies. I visited Katie B. Hines nutrition site in Carolina Beach, did a presentation on nutrition standards with Logan, our compliance specialist. We did a presentation on emergency preparedness for all the retired government employees associations across North Carolina. We had about 120 people attend that virtually. We did a Taking Care showing over in Leland, and Mayor Bozeman was there for that. And then we also did a Dementia Friends information session for the staff of the town of Leland, which was really neat for those folks to come. And one of the employees actually emailed Alan and said how much they appreciated that training and thanked us for offering it. We've been busy in Columbus County. We had a staff person go to the senior prom, which was a super sweet event. And we have 2 employees that will be at the senior picnic, which is kind of like a health fair at the fairgrounds in Columbus County. And then Pender County on West Davis is retiring. He's been there about 37 years, I think. He opened those of the senior centers over in Pender County. So we will be sitting on a group with a recruitment company to choose a new director for Pender County Aging Services. And then we also are looking at doing veterans directed care. So we may be doing a contract with Veterans Administration to provide care management for a program where a veteran can hire their own caregiver in the home. And Alan and I are looking at that and seeing if it's something feasible that we can do, because we'd certainly like to help if we could. That's it. Very good.
Any questions for Holly?
Thank you, Holly.
Thank you, Holly. Appreciate it.
I have a 2 o'clock meeting. Thank y'all. Just in time, barely.
Andrea, Homeless Services.
So, hello.
Hi.
I will try to be equally as fast. So our Homeless Continuum of Care just had our annual membership meeting on May 6th in Burkoff. We were able to appoint 5 new board members and have 2 returning. And we increased board representation in both Pender and Brunswick counties. So that was a really great thing. In that meeting, we highlighted a panel of providers talking about challenges moving forward to affordable housing and moving folks out of homelessness, as well as we shared some data. So some of that we shared to be on the lookout for is our preliminary point in time count numbers. That's our daily census we do at the end of January on folks experiencing both sheltered and unsheltered homelessness. We did overall have about a 15% decrease in the total count. And we also saw a small decrease in chronic homelessness, which was particularly evident in our unsheltered population, which hopefully points to the fact that our permanent supported housing programs are moving folks in that direction. We also had our housing inventory count, which looked at our available beds and utilization rates. We increased our utilization to about 95% of our beds. The ones that were below 100 were particularly our specific populations like veterans, unaccompanied minors, as well as those that are justice involved. So sometimes they're not just open beds that you can use. We also shared specific housing supply gap data from the 2024 BOA National Research Report that was done for the state of North Carolina. This is not anything new to you folks, but Brunswick at number 1 and Pender at number 5 were the highest % growth in population in the state. We also looked at the largest overall housing gaps for the top 10. New Hanover County came in at 6 and Brunswick County came in at 10. And when they took that a step forward and looked at the ratio compared to total population, Pender came in at 10 for one of the largest gaps in affordable housing. So we continue to be a region that is going to see this issue and have to address it accordingly. We were able to submit our system performance measures to HUD. So some of you know that they not only allow us to grant money out to our programs, but they want to make sure that the money that we are using is using effectively. So they look across all of the COCs on the country and look at certain performance measures. Some of our things stayed pretty similar. There were some highlights. Our returns to homeless remains one of our biggest strengths, with just 5% of our folks that we were housed returning to homelessness in 6 to 12 months. That's a really great number considering our challenges. Our first time homelessness increased from 79% to 86%. That means folks that are entering our homeless system, it looks back in our system to see if they've ever experienced that before. And I think that speaks directly to our kind of housing gap issues, the increase in affordable or the fair market rent, and it's making folks have a harder time. We've talked about our older population not being able to keep up with the cost of living. So we were at 79% when the state was at 69%. We've even increased to 86%. That's going to continue to be an issue. Another highlight was 98% of our people that are in our permanent supportive housing programs maintained housing or moved to another permanent situation. So once they are in that program, it's successful. We went over some programmatic numbers. We'll put this on our website. So if you want to really deep dive into our data, I would love for you to do that. We continue to work on some technical assistance around our system performance measures, our database, as well as increasing capacity across the region for permanent supportive housing. We receive free technical assistance to do that. Our core team is meeting up again. We've been able to present to the city of Wilmington's executive management team, as well as be there at the city council meeting when they had a tenant that they were looking at possibly condemning the property, and want to make sure that that person had the adequate support. So if that was to happen, they could enter that system. So we just say that in terms of if any of you all are experiencing that, we are there to kind of support our residents and figure out what the next step could possibly be. We also had a large scale training with our Michigan Coalition Against Homelessness, came down to do some additional training on our database because data is incredibly important. And then we continue to collaborate with New Hanover County Strategy Department to just continuously improve our processes and make sure that we're best serving the region.
Thank you, Andrew. Any questions for Andrew? Questions? Moving on. Wes, Local Government Service.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll keep it brief. We've been out in the region doing trainings. Last week we were in Belleville. I think the week prior down in Topsail Beach. We've had a number of long-range planning projects going on. One down in Carolina Shores, then also one for an affiliate member, Town of Holly Ridge. and then an ongoing one, for Pender County that we're serving as a sub-consultant for that, project as well. On the transportation side of things in the RPO, there's no news or nothing necessarily to update this board on. And then we're continuing to provide assistance for our flood mitigation program. We're in the second year of that program this year. That's it for me, Mr. Chair. I know you guys have had a long meeting. Happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Any questions for Wes? Thank you, Wes. Appreciate it. Workforce, Ginger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, just like everybody else, we don't know about our funding right now, and, it's the president's budget, cuts the programs and wants to consolidate workforce programs, but those are not all actually workforce programs. Some of those are education programs. So I think that, unfortunately, you have people looking at things that don't understand the context of the numbers and that kind of a thing. And so, there's been a lot of advocacy in our world. The idea of making America skilled again requires an investment in workforce, right? It's not the opposite. And the work that we do, there is a return on the investment of the dollars because those are translated to wages that people earn and put back into our communities, right? So the good thing is that workforce is a bipartisan issue, and it's really just kind of getting into the definitions. There was a piece of legislation that was introduced end of last year, and it had a really high training requirement. Again, if we thought just paying for people to go get some training was going to work, we'd have, a free education system, right? Free college. So it's kind of ironic that that's the way that they were looking at it. The reality is that to get your either long-term unemployed or career changers ready for the jobs that are emerging, it requires not just the cost of training being supported, but also the support of people, right? The people that are helping to make sure that they can get through the training and they have all of the resources and support they need, because of more often than not, they are already adults with, families and other responsibilities, right? So there's a lot going on. And so we're just hoping for the best, and, we're going to try to, navigate it. That's it. Any other questions? Let me know.
Any questions for Ginger? I'll tell you one thing. I attended every different graduation at Brunswick Community College on Thursday and Friday. It was like 6 different groups. I was very encouraged. 52 nurses, 100% placement of all 52 of them. Same deal with continuing ed, HVAC, or welding. Holy smokes. You go to welding, they come out, starting pays 80 grand a year.
My cousin's kid did that.
I mean, it was really encouraging. There's a lot more doing the trades now than, I've been on that college board since 2009. I've never missed a graduation. The numbers, particularly in the continuing education stuff, is growing. Very encouraging. I love to see the trades.
Well, I'll just say we had 82 nurses. I went to a graduation with 82 nurses, but I talk a lot about, because I'm on a lot of business development boards. Yeah, workforce is the most important thing. And statistics we just got in New Hanover County on our comprehensive plan were that we're doing really well on the business development side. We need to start growing our workforce here and building them. So I'm a huge public education advocate, and I think we have a great opportunity to do that on all our counties. And to your point about it's the 3 E's now, right? It's education, employment, or enlistment. That's really what we need to look at. But we want to, it'll help with the housing situation too, if we can grow our workforce here and not be recruiting, because that's what's happening right now. A lot of recruitment is happening from outside of our region.
Yeah.
And that's causing multiple issues, so.
Well, and something that's been raised earlier, if federal funding starts to go away and the services are still needed, we'll have to look at our COG region and determine how best to fund the services to get those people into those jobs.
Yeah.
Because it's a necessary piece of work. And I know like the county dabbles in it, but they work with us a little because it's too much for them, right? Because it's the career advising that has to happen. So those are conversations down the road. Hopefully, we'll be funded adequately to do this and to be able to work with the education partners, you know, for the people who are out of school and trying to get back into a job.
Gotta work on it regionally, that's what I understand.
All right, moving on. Chairman report. I just, really quick, I neglected at the start of this to say Happy Mother's Day to all of the women in the room, whether you're a mom of a fur baby or kids or what have you, you're all moms. So Happy Mother's Day. Just a quick point, and then I'm moving it on, turning it over to Brenda. She has something she wants to bring up. There are 16 COGs in this state. We're not alone in all of this. They're all dealing with it. And I have a couple of buddies via the NCACC that also chair their COGs. We talk about it all. In fact, I'll be in Polk County Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And I'm sure this is going to come up. All these COGs are in the same boat. So with that, that is my report. Thank you all again so much. Brenda, you had something you wanted to bring up.
Yeah, I'll be real quick too. We used to meet at 10 o'clock. And because Charlie had his Cape Fear
Yeah, Lower Cape Fear Sewer and Water.
meetings, he was always late, and so he asked if we changed it to 11. Would 10 be okay or work better for everybody? Because Mondays is a busy day for everybody.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
And I just thought I'd bring that up. You know, we changed it for Charlie, and Charlie's not here anymore. And I was just wondering, would it be better for everybody to go back to 10?
What about those of you that drive longer distances?
It works better for me.
Instead of killing him, you know.
Yeah.
By the time we do lunch and everything, we're seldom out of here before.
We're done with Hempstead traffic by
Yeah.
usually 8:30, 9 o'clock.
Usually the meetings aren't this long and usually you're taking your lunch when you leave.
Yeah.
It's budget, a lot of budget stuff, wasn't it? I'm okay with it.
I'm okay.
Yeah, I live here.
10 works for me.
But I live in
Okay, we got 110.
me a long time.
It's fine with us.
Good either way?
Yeah. Schedule's been put out, I'll be here.
Steph, you're good with 10?
Yep.
Teresa, Jan,
I'm fine.
I'm good with it.
We used to do it.
So you wanna, in the future?
You okay with it, Alan? They are.
Absolutely.
So we want to do the next meeting at 10 a.m. instead of
I
11?
would say let's start as soon as possible.
Let's amend the meeting calendar. Since that's been adopted. Should we do that?
That's a good point. Yes. Since we've already all put it into our calendars, I know I'm booked out till the next annual meeting for.
I mean, I know it's not on the agenda, but I don't see why we can't make a motion to amend the calendar.
I'll make the motion to amend the calendar from 11 a.m. to 10 a.m.
I'll second it.
for our meetings.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, somebody say, let's finally go home.
We're all gonna go to town hall. We got a meeting going on.
But you got another meeting?
Yeah.
My goodness.
We are adjourned.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
See you later.
Thank you.
Services.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Which center? Help Center. The Help Center is the old community building on a Third and Raleigh. And what they do is they build out there.
Hey.
See you later, man.
That is the road off.
So not the senior center, whatever, not